Let's start introducing this show. Toyola, tell a little
Hello.
about yourself and introduce this whole thing.
Hey guys, this is the second episode of the first round of our debate tournament from the DGG Discord. We have another 4 debates, and we have another 8 contestants who are very, very ready and jumping at the bit to yell at each other a little bit. This one is going to be a little bit smoother than the last one. We refined some of the kinks. We have a different moderator today. His name is Bali Lobachevsky. I can't pronounce it. It's Bali. And he's going to be stepping in for free. He had an appointment today that he could not make the debate for, but he will be returning in the future episodes. But that shouldn't be about it. If you're ready to go, we can get right into it.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Thank you again, Stefano. We're at 41% of level 2 hype train. 59% left. Can we get to level 3 hype train? Substance channel, give bits, give subs. We appreciate the content, all the things that we do for you, and help keep this up and running. Seriously, thank you for the people who've helped out so far. Okay, let's do it. Who are the first two I'm dragging in?
Okay, so tonight for the first card, we have Jay Weird versus Octavian. Octavian is vehemently against all forms of alternative medicine, and Jay Weird is going to be trying to change his mind tonight.
Okay, all right. Bring them in. Okay, all right. Thank you all for coming through. All right. Hello. You guys are all on stream. Yeah. Oh wow, 5 cameras. Oh, this is so. Look at these beautiful people.
I don't hide my face. I'm no
beautiful,
coward.
handsome people. Oh wow. All right. Look. Right. The numbers are going to go through the roof, right? Sex appeal at maximum. Loving it. So thank you so much for the 100 bits. Okay, help us get to the train. All right, so we're going to introduce you all. First, our judge. Boy, you're going to have to pronounce that for yourself. Yes, moderator, excuse
Bali.
me, moderator. Bali?
Bali.
Yeah. Bali. Okay, Bali. Thank you for being a part of this. Tell us about yourself and introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, so let's see. I've been palling around various sort of political philosophy discords for the last few years. In my day job, I work as a data science instructor. Glad to be able to facilitate the discussions today.
Thank you. All right. So that'll be our very kind moderator. I'm very happy to have him. And then we have our 2 guests. We will start with Jay Weird, because why not? Like, that's a name you can trust. Jay Weird, could you please so kind as introduce
question
yourself?
your objectivity on trustfulness.
Bias Prime. Bias Prime.
So yeah, I'm kind of like a deadbeat. No, I'm a house husband. I'm also a tattoo apprentice. I stream sometimes. If you look up this shit, I helped organize the background logistics of the tournament. I just have too much free time.
Bias.
That's me. Mm-hmm. And Octavian here is my good friend, beloved friend for many years now. We go way back.
Absolutely.
I remember back in the day when we used to hold hands down by the canal.
Yeah.
We had a very loving, touching relationship. We're here to end that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right into the ground.
All right, Octavian. All right, so you're going to make fun of your former lover here. That's okay. All right. Look, it's all right.
Reconciliation.
He broke your heart.
Yeah,
he broke your heart. So this is what happens. So please, Octavian, introduce yourself.
Yeah, my former lover here and I had a lot of disagreements, and I'm a college student, and I go to school, and that's what I do on my day-to-day basis, and I debate people on Discord. But Jay Ward and I go way back. Just came to this, I guess.
All right. So let's get cracking. So I'll let the moderator take it away.
So today's topic is alternative medicine, for and against. Why don't we have the positive side go first? All right. I don't know why you're trying to insinuate that I'm positive or anything. So Octavian, before I start into this, I want to ask you a question. Why are you so unconcerned with thousands of years of history? Why do you disregard the nuances, perspectives, the care, and the dignity of these cultivated practices? Why do you deem something that can be expanded upon and uplifted as something as worthless pseudoscience? And do you think in the many years that were spent cultivating these practices that we have nothing to show for it? No effectiveness whatsoever. Now, I know I just asked you a lot of questions, but I'm still in my opening statement, so deal with it. You can answer them later. I'm not here to advocate for any and all practice, okay? I'm not naive to the world of scams and con artists, but I will appeal with this certain sensibility and trust that I personally believe, I don't know why it came out like that we are too comfortable within our own ways. Our idea, the idea of orthodox medicine, which is simply just a system in which doctors and healthcare professionals alike treat symptoms using drugs, radiation, and surgery. Now, we believe in these means so strongly that all other medicine is deemed alternative as a second choice. All right? I don't believe we should spin on the practices that we believe can feel effective simply because we don't understand them. Carousel doesn't seem like a good reason to me. Practices like acupuncture, natural childbirth, therapy, yoga, or hell, even Tai Chi. I don't believe that we should also then discredit those practices after we come to understand them and then try to validate them by lumping it into the Western medicine lexicon, if you will. I don't believe that we should attempt an erasure of what was once deemed pseudoscientific in order to push it into the snug, tight fit of the colloquial understanding that we currently have as medicine. I want to see these practices utilized for the good of people, and I want these practices understood. I want us to live better lives, and I want us to respect the same practices that got us there. Furthermore, many, like my opponent, may claim that if something works, then it's simply medicine. However, this is intellectually dishonest. It's simply an argument attempting to minimize and cover up any and all distinction. It's important to understand that when we use the term medicine, we're using the term orthodox medicine, and we all know it. We're talking about a fundamental practice that is categorically different from the individualist practices that I have previously mentioned. And this same orthodox practice attempts to push anything outside of its scope into the status of pseudoscience. I relinquish the time.
Octavian, your response.
Mine is going to be a bit shorter. Then I'm just going to go into the debate afterward with that. But mine is not as long as it. My goal here is to prove a few things. One is that the acceptance of any alternative medicine as a possibility leads to rejection of regular scientific medical practices. A recent and significant example of this is the rejection of the COVID-19 vaccine by certain communities that accept alternative medical practices. And other examples can include other examples that I can get into later. The second goal of this is to prove that alternative medical practices will lead to the acceptance of conspiracy theories about society, conspiratorial thinking, including, as aforementioned, the COVID-19 theories that came around during 2020 and 2021. For example, like the theory that certain people run the world and they are trying to inject us with certain medicine. These theories are negative and harmful to society. My goal here today is to prove that an acceptance of an alternative medical practices lead to these types of conspiratorial thinking. The last point is more of a response to the general perception of alternative medicines, like that really all alternative. Alternative medicines must not be accepted by the mainstream, nor medical research. For example, just because a drug is not used in certain countries or certain districts does not make it alternative medicine. Alternative medicine necessitates the non-ability to be researched and a non-ability to be used by mainstream doctors and scientists for treatment for medical problems. Medicine is a science or practice of the diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of disease and technical use, right? So if you are using these normal medical practices by doctors, then necessarily these medicines are not alternative medicine. That's my opening statement.
All right. Jay Weird, sort of having posed the initial questions. Octavian, do you have any
Can you say those questions one more time?
responses or remarks?
Just so I remember them.
Yeah, here, I'll just give you the rundown here. So first question, why are you so unconcerned with thousands of years of medical history?
Yeah. So my belief is that our scientific methods today, and with provable results, are better than the scientific methods of the past. As we all know, the average life of a human has gone up in the past thousands of years, and has gone up significantly in the past few hundred years as we developed specific scientific medical practices and using the scientific method to form these practices for individuals in our like today, right? That is why I reject it.
Can you tell me the last recent benchmark that we've achieved in extending human life?
No, I cannot. I only know like the general trend.
Okay.
The next question.
I'll just go ahead and ask you the next question here. Why do you disregard or deem something that could be expanded upon and uplifted as a worthless pseudoscience? Like, why would you say... let me ask you a question. Would you be for or against an acupuncture treatment for yourself?
Against.
Okay. Now, can you clarify why you deem this to be pseudoscientific?
At this point in time, to my knowledge, scientific like research into acupuncture shows that it's not effective to treating whatever like treatments it would try to solve.
So my research says something a little different, and if you want to get into that, I'd be very happy to.
Sure. What does acupuncture solve?
So acupuncture is specifically believed to be used for a treatment for chronic pain. And we've actually seen studies of a control group, then a group fed with sham acupuncture or a placebo, whereas quote unquote pseudo medical professionals would just stick needles in random spots, not penetrate certain areas. Sometimes they wouldn't even penetrate the skin, or they would do something like shock therapy to random parts of the body. And the study that had the control group and the actual acupuncture group showed a dissimilation of like the pain index scale. I believe acupuncture decreased the pain index scale by about 25%, where then sham acupuncture was around 17 to 13, and obviously the control group was none. Do you not believe these numbers to be largely beneficial?
Not like, again, unless it's proven, like if that's proven to be the case with scientific methods, this would solve chronic pain. And again, we have now gone to the problem of your last question, which I'm pretty sure you, or whatever, one of your questions you asked is, when is something an alternative medicine, right? If acupuncture is considered to be acceptable by the scientific community as a medical practice to solve chronic pain, my question is, what's the difference between that and any other medical practice? You talked about how at the start that we use like drugs, radiation, and a third like type method that I forgot at this point in time to like solve problems. But that's not the only ways surgery, to solve like medical problems. These are not the only ways that medical professionals try to solve problems, right? They try to use any and all methods through like scientific practices with deterministic results to solve problems, right? That's why we have these medical practices. That's why we have the scientific method, right? Alternative medicines are defined by the fact that they aren't used in these like normal, like, daily doctor, your when you go to your doctor every 6 months, you're a regular family practitioner, right? If they use these practices, it necessarily is not alternative medicine, right? For example,
see, the problem with that is you're not talking about medicine at this point. You're talking about orthodox medicine, which orthodox medicine is strictly confined to drugs, surgery, and whatever the last one was, radiation. And that is the term. When people say medicine, they're talking about westernized orthodox medicine, standard practice, the fundamentalist medicine that only uses what is the most effective for the broad spectrum, rather than an individualistic practice, which is a lot of these alternative medicines are, that require very specific like doctor to patient care. And that's why you can't put them in the same medical lexicon. because you can't run into issues where like, oh, this is a cure-all, and then they're not looking into individualistic variables. Sorry, I know that kind of came out of my mouth all weird.
So then how would the scientific medical practice solve problems for individual cases of problems, right? So for example,
That's when we apply
scientific methods
or
have solved
individualistic.
have solved like specific small case like medical like problems before, right? We have the scientific method does not just only involve, you know, large scale, you know, like not just trying to solve tuberculosis, but also trying to solve, you know, individual cases. For example, there's lots of case studies in individuals in the scientific community for medical purposes, right? Why would the scientific orthodox community go into these case studies of individuals to solve, you know, like people with, you know, 15 cases, right? Why would they go into this, you know, case study of this individual to solve their problem just because, you know, they have to go to everybody and go to these generalized practices?
Can
right?
I hold you on this real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So you brought up case studies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you believe that case studies are a good show of the scientific method? And that you would deem these as orthodox practices?
Depends how it's researched, but it's like a certain part of the scientific. It's like a certain part of like how we determine research, right? So if a case study is like, you know, step 1, step 2, you know, it's, you know, not the final, like it's not the final solution to the problem, but it is like the way in which you go to look into the problem, right? So for example, if you're looking into how to like solve, you know, like with COVID-19 drugs, which is what I like mostly did my research about, you know, when you go to, or the COVID-19 vaccine, anything like that, when you go into these cases, your goal is to, you know, find, you know, what these specific drugs or things do to specific individuals, and you broaden it out to more, you know, stage 2, stage 3 trials for these specific, you know, drugs, vaccines, whatever. And then after that point in time, you know, you start, you know, getting into what you want to do, right? So like that's generally like your case studies is like you're not like, you're kind of like dipping your toes in and or I would say more dipping your like legs in at that point, right? To get into solve the problem.
So you'd say it's like the first step towards an orthodox approach.
The first few steps. It's you know, you could solve the problem necessarily through case studies if you wanted to. If it solves the problem.
This is like leading to another point. Then would you not look at the same case studies done that show effective results of, say, any kind of alternative practice, because there are plenty, and not go, okay, well, this is the first step of the process. I believe this to have some effect, therefore some value, and then therefore it is not deemed harmful, at least currently at the time while researching. Obviously, you can show that something's harmful later through the case study.
Depends.
Or
if you're using like or if you're using orthodox methods and practices to like look at alternative, quote unquote, alternative medicines, again, I'm questioning whether or not it's, you know, alternative at this point, right? If acupuncture is being used through orthodox means to solve these problems, right? Then my question is it alternative medicine, right? People would consider radiation, you know, a long time ago to be, you know, like alternative medicine at some point in time, right? But today we see it as, you know, orthodox practice, right? Because we use it in cases to solve. Right.
So to your earlier point where you stated that you would be against further looking into like alternative practices or alternative researches just because you think that it can lead to like conspiracy or can lead to attempting to overlook, say, the fundamental understanding of what the current medical research shows or something like that, would you then say that these processes, if you did what you wanted to, could then never become orthodox processes?
No. So my case and my argument was that the use of alternative medicine has led to conspiracy theories in other ways. For example, multiple studies have shown that the use of alternative medicine, not the research or study into alternative medicine, which is not my argument. My argument is the use of alternative medicine leads to conspiratorial thinking for regular practical medicine. For, like I said, for example, alternative medicine has led multiple times to communities rejecting the COVID-19 vaccine, which again, I would like to say, I think we would agree is a negative outcome of alternative medicine use, right? My conundrum isn't with the scientific community researching, you know, fringe or alternative topics.
I'm not going to lie to you, Octavian.
Yeah.
I've been using some alternative medicine myself, and I was not able to pay attention to you after Toya left the ball. It took my attention completely away from you.
You want me to say that one more time?
Yeah, but can you do it in a nicer voice? Like, we used to be lovers.
Yeah. Sure.
Just start kind of in the middle, because I was following you.
Yeah. So like my gripe wasn't with, you know, researchers looking into alternative ways, you know, to look at different structures or different methods to solve, you know, problems that people have, you know, with their pain or with any other, you know, type of, you know, problem someone has medically, right? My problem was with alternative medicine today being used by communities to like I guess supplement or replace regular medicine, right? That was my process and my like thought process here, right? So with that being the case, if communities use alternative medicine before it is researched, right, before you get this orthodox practice coming into the scene, right, you then see increases in conspiratorial thinking for regular medical practices, right? You see less use
would you still say this even if the practice shows effectiveness higher than placebo?
So if you were to have can you say it one more time? I'm sorry.
Would you say this same thing? Would you say I have to apply the scientific method if the effectiveness is demonstrated to be higher than placebo? Just an effect.
So an example would be like your study that you were saying earlier.
Yeah, with the acupuncture. Obviously, like that study isn't just based on feeling. That study is based on empirical data sets of like I think 11,000 participants. It was a Harvard paper, but I didn't get my sources in time because I was out of town, so I can't quote anything.
Yeah, that's all good.
So your mom told me all of this stuff.
Yeah. I would say that if necessarily there is scientific consensus or general scientific consensus, which is not like full 90 plus consensus, right? Which like I would say general scientific consensus is you have studies proving that you have better than placebo outcomes in the scientific community, that it is necessarily orthodox medicine at that point, right? You've gone through the scientific process to prove that this necessarily is effective for people and is starting to be used in specific cases to help them in practice, right? If that is the case, then necessarily it is regular medicine.
No, that's not how. Wait. That's not how they got to the results. That's how we're using our lens to understand those results. They got to those results by trial and error, based on does this work? Yes, no. Shows to see effect. Does this work? Yes, no. Seems to show effect. And then they started ditching the other things that weren't showing as much effectiveness. It's not like they used fucking XYZ to get here. That's just how we're viewing it.
Yeah.
But then when you say by us viewing it in that way, we're allowed to then say, okay, this is now orthodox.
Yeah. So the lens of our view, or like my argument is that if necessarily our structure of it must be better than placebo in a research from a research institution to show for a if there's a significant difference in a research study of a alternative medicine at that point, and then it's copied and it's considered like acceptable at that point in time, right? It's not alternative medicine; it's just medicine, right? You've now crossed the line, or you have joined orthodox medicine, because this is the process by which orthodox medicine is used, right? You get new medicine, you study it, and you use it if it's effective, right? That's how orthodox medicine works, right? Like you get that's it, right? You study something, and then that's given to you as like a possible treatment. You get the case study, you then do like more of a stage 2, stage 3 trial for it, and then people use it.
Do you not think that there'd be a huge issue with creating individualist practices within orthodox medicine, which is a fundamentalist belief? Whereas one thing might not work for another, it'll work for this guy, but it won't work for that guy. And then you're trying to mass prescribe people into like, I don't think that these alternative medicines could ever become orthodox medicine because they're individualistic medicine.
What do you mean by individualist?
By individualistic, I would mean that each one of these practices is constructed specifically for a singular patient after doctor and patient briefing and things like that. These practices are not around the board. Okay, you can do this to the same person each time and you'll get the exact same results. But a lot of things like meditation, Tai Chi, fucking acupuncture.
Is antidepressants orthodox medicine?
I would say no, actually.
You wouldn't say antidepressants are orthodox medicine?
I would say that we use the scientific process to get to the conclusions that we do with SSRIs, but at the end of the day, I've been prescribed 4 or 3 SSRIs in my life. The majority of the time, it's just, here, take this. Oh, did that work out for you for 3 months? Here, take this then. Oh, that didn't work out? Okay, here, take this then. And that was my process through the system.
So did you go to
which I would say is the same system that you would then disagree with if I said, here, eat this plant for 3 months. Here, eat this plant for 3 months. Here, eat this plant for 3 months. Did any of those plants make you feel better? No, that one made you feel like taking a nap. Okay, we should do that one.
Jay Weird, could you clarify? Do you think that the practice of prescribing SSRIs and the evidential basis for them is an example of a scientifically verified alternative medicine, or do you think it's
absolutely.
scientifically
When I use the
verified
term
orthodox
alternative,
medicine?
when I use the term alternative, I'm saying specifically outside of the construct of orthodox. So specifically without the definition of orthodox medicine.
Then could you clarify exactly what an orthodox medicine is? Because
Sure.
you might think, for instance, that SSRIs have like a clinical practice. They are routinely prescribed by like Western physicians. They are the subject of multiple studies, and they're prescribed and diagnosed on an individual basis, like a lot of other medicines we have.
Like a lot of other alternative medicines.
A lot of other mainstream, like, is Tylenol an alternative medicine? Is ibuprofen an alternative medicine?
Well, those are over-the-counter medicines that I think the majority of people understand that they can take this medicine without an individual.
Sure, but physicians will prescribe them. Say, if you're pregnant, right? They'll prescribe one.
Do they only prescribe them in individualistic circumstance, or they will prescribe them as their general use as well, right? Because then wouldn't that just be a middle line between the two of them?
So wouldn't alternative medicine? Yeah. So the question is like, what is medicine then? Like the question, like to me,
oh no, medicine is just anything that cures you. You have medicine, then you have orthodox medicine, and you have alternative medicine. That's the framework we've created. In actuality, medicine is just anything that cures an ailment. And that's not how it's used colloquially, though. Which this whole thing is less of an actual argument of systems and more of an argument of the political science around like the actual medicine.
Wouldn't you argue that through the definition of orthodox medicine you started at the start of the argument, which is a system in which doctors and other healthcare professionals treat systems using drugs, radiation, and therapy necessarily must include SSRIs because they are drugs?
Well, it wasn't therapy, it was surgery, correct?
Or surgery, yeah, my bad surgery.
Yeah. No, then, I mean, yeah, SSRIs could be drugs, and I guess they could classify it as orthodox, or not could be, it is a drug, right? But I believe even though it is being prescribed to you as a drug, it's more or less a slapstick approach to the way in which we do medicine.
Yeah, but
not slapstick.
It would fall under the It would fall under the definition of orthodox medicine, which
would fall under the definition of alternative medicine as well, though, or at least not alternative, individualistic. Excuse me. Which is what I'm trying to say. Alternative medicine is individual. I guess I should clarify. Alternative medicine is individualistic medicine, but not all individualistic medicine is alternative medicine. I should have just said that at the start.
Okay.
The whole reason I'm trying to dissuade us from orthodox and alternative is because I believe that innate word kind of asks for a pseudoscientific basis or a pseudoscientific bias. And when you call it fundamentalist and individualistic, I think that leads to kind of equal credence either way. I think I just used that word wrong, but I don't care.
Sorry, just give me a second. So if your family doctor, let's say, hold on, just to reframe my definition.
So, lactoid, do you dispute?
Not lactoid.
That's Octavian.
Sorry.
Come on, Volak.
Natural mistake.
Come on.
Hey, lactoid, how you feeling over there?
Did you lose your train of thought?
Can you maybe, Octavian, clarify how you distinguish maybe mainstream medicine that you endorse from alternative medicines? Like, what's the criteria that lets you endorse one and oppose the other?
Yeah. So generally, when we talk about medical practices, we generally want to have medical practices that yield general results and or specific results that solve the problem, right? So my goal is to have research and studies through orthodox means, through general, like example case studies to stage 2, stage 3 trials for drugs and or other medicines to solve problems for individuals or for generally for the groups for us as a society, right? So my goal would be like, let's go for a vaccine, for example, right? you would have a trial done by a company or done by some like other group of individuals. It could be a state, a company, anything like that, that wants to put this drug or put this treatment to market, right? This then would go through some type of trial, some type of process through stage 2, stage 3 trials with a vetting process through the systems of accountability we have in whatever practice we have today, right? So it would be going through like the FDA or going through other types of systems, right? So generally you'd be going through the orthodox or normal means of like checks and balances that we have today to solve problems, right? So when you like make a drug that has like herbal elements to it, it's necessarily going to, I mean, it could use aspects of alternative medicine as like a pretext to research, right? But again, it doesn't mean that like, you should then use alternative medicine in all cases, right? So that's like generally how I define like orthodox medicine is the systems in place we have to check and balance, medical procedures through general and individual means.
Wait, but this stance wouldn't make you necessarily predisposed against alternative medicine, would it?
The stance that makes me predisposed to against alternative medicine is necessarily the outcomes of alternative medicine use, right? So again, the reasons of my firm stance against alternative medicine is necessarily the outcomes of conspiratorial thinking for orthodox and traditional medicine, right? Because to my knowledge, orthodox and traditional medicine is extremely effective at solving a majority of the problems we see today, right? But the problem is when you are using alternative medicine prior to like understanding or use, you're generally rejecting the orthodox system or the system in place we have of checks and balances, right? For example, I'm going to go to the kind of main example here. All right.
Do you think I'm arguing that we should use alternative medicines over orthodox medicines?
No.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because
I don't think you're arguing that. I think that we see different outcomes of alternative medicine and how it affects.
Label it as like a pseudoscience.
That's not the argument. I'm against alternative medicine use. Right? That's the argument.
Right.
The argument is that alternative medicine use leads to negative outcomes in society. Right? So the negative outcomes that I see in society is that we reject people who use alternative medicine generally tend to reject orthodox medicine. Right? I'm not saying that if you, for example, go to your like whatever the one where you like tap on your back. I don't remember the name. Like we're not acupuncture, but a different like thing for alternative medicine, but you still accept orthodox medicine. Chiropractic.
Chiropractic is not an example that I would attempt to defend, since chiropractic was actually created by a scam artist attempting to make money.
I don't think you're defending, but I'm going to use it as an example of like an
outside of placebo, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about specific practices, not the disciplines as a whole.
I'm not trying to say that like you support chiropractic.
Yeah, I just wanted to state that out.
Hold on. So Octavian,
you're way smarter than the chat.
Octavian, can you finish your point?
Yeah, sure. So just because you go to like some chiropractic therapy doesn't necessarily mean you reject orthodox practice. What it does mean through our studies of individuals and groups in society is that you generally will reject orthodox mean of solving your practice, right? Practice. For example, there was a study that did like a lot of, I believe it was Finnish adults who were surveyed whether or not they use like certain alternative medicines or not certain like alternative medicines in general, how it was defined through this study, right? Complementary alternative medicine, CAM. And when they were asked if they use it, if they checked yes for alternative medicines, they generally tended to reject certain, COVID-19 treatments, such as the vaccine and or other things given by the Finnish government to treat and prevent COVID-19. Right. So that's generally the outcomes that I'm trying to avoid here. Is I'm trying to avoid people using alternative medicine as a replacement. Right? I'm not saying that all alternative medicines necessarily have bad outcomes. My argument is that use of alternative medicines necessarily leads to bad outcomes, right? If you, for example, I would say that the second that medical marijuana goes through the systems in place to be accepted in certain countries, such as Canada or other places that it would be accepted in, it would be an orthodox medicine that we would then use in society. But if you try to treat yourself with marijuana without understanding what it could be used for or talking to your specific family doctor, you're going to be using it against, orthodox medicine, which is what I'm trying to avoid. If you're trying to get what I'm saying.
Wait, hold on. Would you classify it as an individual use or a fundamental use? I want to know
that. I'm not 100% sure on the. It depends what you're trying to treat with it. To my knowledge, there are certain conditions and cases that at this point in time that would be able to be treated with with medical marijuana, but at this point in time, I don't. Just because like somebody uses it to like, I don't. I believe most of the use is like just generally like, oh, I'm using marijuana to, for example, treat my depression, is what a lot of people say. I don't believe that that is the case. That there's like blood above placebo for that, right? But you can take like SSRIs or other systems and methods through the orthodox system instead of continually just smoking, weed over and over again, right? So,
Right. Well, I would also probably tell you shouldn't self-diagnose for anything, right?
yeah,
Yeah, like I don't
so.
know if that example is like all that clear cut, because I mean, like you're basically talking about somebody going, "I'm gonna smoke weed instead of going to a doctor, and I'll be fine."
Right.
Like,
but the thing is, when you start using alternative medicines, do you agree that like if you use alternative medicines, you're generally going to use other alternative medicines? Is that generally? Do you agree with that?
I believe that if you understand that these alternative medicines that you're using are only effective principles, which is the ones that I'm arguing for, you're probably not going to go down into the crackpot like rabbit hole of like, oh, okay, well it says here if I bury an egg underneath the ground for 100 years, I'll have good luck. Like I don't think that you're gonna go into crystal healing if you go seek acupuncture, because one shows effects above placebo that you can recognize.
Do you think that people who use alternative medicine generally understand that?
I think that that's why we need to make this distinction and actually push for the study of this thing so that we can actually educate the general populace.
Yeah, but do you believe that they need to be educated?
I do believe they need to be educated, but I would also say that the world as a whole probably has less of an understanding on alternative medicines because we write them off as pseudoscientific.
Do you think that do you think that today use in alternative medicines, like people who use it generally like will do like what I said is like they'll go to other alternative medicines, like people who use it today, not the people like yourself, but other individuals who use alternative medicines, like they go to acupuncture.
I don't know also if go the to other general things. Person is going to be, oh, I got acupuncture treatment for my chronic pain, I'm not going to take the COVID vaccine.
No. But
I think either one of us can make a distinction like that.
Do you think that not that like I would make the distinction that would
I don't think I can answer this question outside of the realm of speculation. I mean, if you want me to give you an answer just off the top of my head, I think no. I don't think the general person is going to be like, I smoked weed, no vaccine, or I smoked weed, I'm not going to get an MRI. Like, I don't think the general person's like, oh, I smoked weed, I'm going to go to the shrunken head voodoo doctor to see if he can cure my testicular cancer. Like, I don't think anybody's thinking like that.
Do you agree with
not anybody, but anybody within the realm of average.
Okay, here, I'm going to try and apply something else here that is part of my argument to this, right? Do you believe that conspiratorial thinking leads to other conspiratorial thinking?
Yeah. Oh, no, that's been shown. Like,
yeah.
If you have conspiracies, you start devolving into conspiracies, and then conspiracies become parodies of other conspiracies. But that's already the case in the current system we have as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say it's a fact that we all agree on, right? That conspiracy theories lead to other conspiracy theories, right? So, as part of CAM, right, we know that people believe as part of complementary alternative medicine, generally these people or people who use complementary alternative medicine have a tendency towards a significantly higher belief in conspiracy theories and distrust in orthodox medicine, right?
What is the wait? How do you know that?
I have a study. If you want me to
what is the study?
There's a study done by people in like Finland. I can link it to you as part of the research that we did.
It was farther than like a polling survey, right?
No, it was a survey. It was just a survey of like people's beliefs on the COVID-19 vaccine and trust of information sources.
I mean, where was this done? What was the study size? Was it?
The study size was 1,325 Finnish adults who filled out a survey on Facebook.
I have no idea about anything that goes on with Finnish politics, nor do I care to. So I have no idea what their biases are, what leans where.
So they compared these individuals who took complementary alternative medicine compared to the regular population of the country, to see if like they believed in conspiracy theories more often, right? If they use alternative medicine, right? So what they did is they just took the population of literally the only difference is the population that used alternative medicine, the population that didn't, and then they took the study and said, "Hey, do you believe in X? Do you believe in like these things about the COVID-19 vaccine?"
Question?
Right.
Because a lot of like scholarly journals are like things that are, I don't know, just scientific data. It usually shows if there is like a certain level of bias, rather than it be low or unclear, medium, high. Do you know what the current level of bias is for this information?
What did you describe what you're asking?
I'm asking you, do you understand what independent variables could have led to biases in the picks outside of the belief of alternative medicine? Things like regional aptitude, things like cultural traditions of the area, things like political leanings in the state or in the country, excuse me. Just when you're asking surveys, you're talking to a lot of people, usually not that far out of a collective space. So I wanted to see what kind of bias was within this like data set.
So the only difference between the two populations of the control and the non-control group was the use of alternative medicine. So I'm trying to ask,
I just explained like the geopolitical.
So you're trying to like the geopolitical differences of
yeah,
like
geopolitical variables. I mean, it's a survey, right? You're just taking an answer. So there's a lot of things contextually that don't come up with like surveys. Like if I show you a survey that's like, these are the people that are for guns or against guns. And then I go, okay, I'm going to survey one area in Oklahoma and the other area in California. I'm going to get wildly different results.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to say. What is the level of bias in this?
This was done in the same place. I
get that. I don't know the culture of the people. I don't know the geopolitical state of the country.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's separate factions. I don't know if there's wildly different beliefs, because in America, we have wildly different beliefs from one person to the other.
Yeah, I would agree.
And that is the political sphere that I understand.
So guys, we're kind of getting toward the end of the discussion. I'd like us to sort of refocus on areas of disagreement, not about necessarily this particular study, more about which treatments you think, Jay Weird, that aren't being used by mainstream Western doctors, aren't being prescribed or being prescribed wrongly, that are the alternative medicines, and Octavian, whether you object to their inclusion. So Jay Weird, could you identify like specific alternative medicine practices?
So I can just read from there.
Acupuncture.
So I said acupuncture, things like natural childbirth, therapy, yoga, tai chi, any of those.
Can you clarify what you mean by therapy? Because physical therapy and
then I'll say
therapy,
specifically outside of if you want me to make it like individual forms of therapy, I would say even cognitive behavioral therapy is probably deemed like an alternative science, because like any mental, we don't understand fundamentally what consciousness is, and we can't use the scientific like wow, why did I forget the word? Scientific method to show what consciousness is or show what the mental state of a person is, right? So we're going off of a lot of correlative ideas that we have based on our ideas on how neurons and like different chemicals and things like that work in the brain, which is changing constantly all of the time.
So your assessment is that cognitive behavioral therapy is an example of an alternative medicine that ought to be treated.
I would say probably outside, because I don't like using the term alternative, because in my framework, the definition I use for it is individualistic, and I would say it's an individualistic practice.
The topic of the debate is about alternative medicine. So
right.
Can we maybe clarify our terms?
What is individual against the pseudoscientific push of the term?
So what do you mean? What do you mean when you say individualistic medicine?
Things that pertain to person to doctor, individual applied techniques. Just things that aren't.
Do you think physical therapy is an individual?
That's why I did not. I don't know enough about physical therapy. I'll be honest.
So some of these treatments that you're talking about are recommended routinely by Western physicians and psychologists. Yeah. So it seems like there isn't like a mainstream, fringe distinction here. It seems like maybe the distinction you're getting at is about
I'm getting at a
particularized diagnosis. Excuse me, could you repeat that?
I said the distinction I was trying to get at was a colloquial distinction. I think the majority of people write these things off as pseudoscientific.
Okay, Octavian, do you disagree with that?
I wouldn't disagree that people see alternative medicine as pseudoscientific generally.
But the majority of things practices. I just said. Yeah.
Let's try to focus on the specific areas of disagreement.
Sorry, let me write.
So we had cognitive behavioral therapy, we had acupuncture, we had Tai Chi, yoga.
Tai Chi and yoga. Okay. I wouldn't say that people specifically have any negative views necessarily of yoga or CBT. I would say that they definitely have negative views of acupuncture and Tai Chi, but that is more like the views necessarily the people, not like necessarily the results of like what they can do. And like I said before, like Orthodox medicine, like how do I describe this? Do you think that like going to see a therapist is outside the Orthodox like medical practices?
I don't know if I'd say it is now, but at a time it was for sure.
Do you think that because we've assimilated these types of structures that all alternative medicine, that like we necessarily like reject them and see all of them as negative?
I would say a large population of people would reject them and see them as negative. I would also say that in the process of determining whether something goes from alternative to orthodox, there is a large pushback regardless of how it like faces, like through history and through Orthodox medicine and the practices that we started to develop. If you wanted to say that alternative medicine is necessarily Orthodox medicine by the standard of which it is used, I'm going off of your framework. Because it wouldn't work for your argument that this is your framework and that you would say that the negative effects outweigh the positive benefit from developing these things.
Yeah, so like I said, I would say that right now, if you're arguing that like there's a specific negative view of alternative medicines in general, I wouldn't disagree with that. But the specific medicines that you named, I don't think there's like a necessary like negative view, I would even say even in the scientific community of these medicines, especially like things like CBT or yoga. There's definitely like conflict going on within the communities of like whether or not they have a scientific backing. Now, acupuncture, I would say, is probably way more out there, as well as I don't really know. I couldn't tell you the opinion of people have on Tai Chi and whether or not it's effective. But again, Orthodox medicine like will integrate like alternative medicine if it sees results, especially, right? So that's why I generally say,
Do you think this process is done without conspiracy?
We're starting to run out of time here. I think this would be a good opportunity for each of you to give your closing statements. So since Octavian just spoke, Jay Weird, we'll begin with you and allow Octavian the final word.
All right, guys. So I'm going to level with you, chat. First debate, okay? Yeah, I was on a flight this whole time. Anyways, I love alternative medicine. It's good. It's great for you. Anybody here that's trying to get weed legalized and isn't down for this, you're a hypocrite, and your mom doesn't love you. And Octavian, specifically to you, I want us to give it another chance. I think we can do it again if we try.
All right, thank you, Jay Weird. Octavian.
Alternative medicines necessarily lead to conspiratorial thinking, as I've proven in this debate. And necessarily, this conspiratorial thinking leads to the rejection of Orthodox medicine. This then leads to negative outcomes, obviously, as we know, to things like the COVID-19 vaccine and other, let's say, Orthodox medicines not being used. This is why I reject alternative medicine and reject necessarily the label of certain medicines as alternative medicine, because, in my opinion, these are Orthodox medicine and are used on a day-to-day basis. For example, SSRIs are Orthodox medicine necessarily through any definition we gave in this discussion. However, necessarily Jay Ward must reject this in his arguments because of the way it's introduced into individuals. That's my closing argument.
All right, thank you both. That'll wrap up this
discussion.
discussion. Octavian,
I rejected you multiple times in that.
Oh. Okay.
You still lost the 1v1.
Oh boy. Right. So thank you all so much. We, the judges in the background, have cast our votes. And I was gonna do like a whole thing, you know, like one by one, like letting know which votes came in, but you know, it was unanimous. Octavian, you win. So Octavian, thank you so much for
the 1v1 I was talking about was a league game, by the way. I just wanted everyone to know that.
Octavian, do you have any words?
Octavian again in the next round.
Yeah. Do you have any words, Octavian, for your resounding victory?
Thanks, Jared, for finding the topic. I did not know that you believe this. I think we could have a
I
longer
don't
conversation
actually.
about. I think we could. I think we could. Of course. I think we could. I think we could have a longer conversation about how we should integrate different medicines into Orthodox
No,
medicine.
Octavian, I agree with everything you say.
Yeah. So and I think just having these discussions is very effective. I'd also like to thank everyone who came out to watch the stream, and thank Toyolo and everyone in the behind the scenes for helping us get this debate. And I'll see you next week.
Take care, buddy.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey,
Octavian, you want to play League?
And Parasocial, Park says, let's fucking go, Octavian. So 100 bits from them. Parasocial Park has been cheerleading you in the entire time, right? They gave the 100 bits before just for you. So yes.
Thanks, Park.
Yeah. Shout out to you, Park. Thank you for supporting the stream. With that, thank you. Okay. Moving on. All right. We'll see you guys later.
Wait, can I get one last shout out?
Oh yeah, you guys. Oh, you guys can tell people where they can find you, like on social media, both of you.
Oh, wait, Octavian, you were talking a bunch. Let me go.
No, J-Weird, go ahead.
J-Weird on everything. I'm a tattoo apprentice right now. I will be a pro tattoo artist. I am working on an individualistic style that will be unique to me. So get over it. Also, I might start streaming tattoo practice, so that'd be cool if you're interested. Last shout out I'd love to give Parasocial Park. Thanks for watching, buddy. Stay in there. I know the last debate didn't go great for you, but you got the next one, my man. All right, I'm out of here, guys.
All right. I guess Octavian 821, Octavian 821 on everything. Thanks for having me out. I'll be here next week. And thanks, Park, I guess, for supporting me the whole way. Thank you, Park. And thank you, everyone
who believed in you.
Who believed in me. Thank you. Thanks, Prime, as well, for having that debate.
It's the power of love, right? Have a good
It was
one.
power of love. Jeez, great.
Have a good one. Bye. Okay. So yeah, is this the two people in the waiting room? Are they?
Yes, sir. They are. They are ready to go.
And shout out to Parasocial Park again. Says good sports. Thanks, Jay Weird. Okay, thank you to Parasocial for the 100 bits. Much appreciated. Okay, let me bring in these other two individuals. And guys, if you support like this channel, like what we're doing, hit that follow button. Hit that follow button. Make sure notifications are on, so you know I'm going live. It is 7 nights a week. Not this particular thing, but like other stuff. 7 nights a week. So yeah, come on by. And hit up our social media, !social in chat. For our social media. Okay. All right. So let's bring them in. Hello. Both of you. Nice to see you. All right. What's the face? Human. Do you have another name for us to refer to you as?
Oh yeah, I can change it in here, can't I?
Oh yeah. Please go ahead.
Server. Yeah, you can call me Aurora if you'd like.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. All right, so moderator or Toyo, do you want to introduce this?
So yeah, we have a pretty interesting one right now. Marcia is going to come in and tell everybody why they should never have babies, why it's bad to have babies, and she's gonna really ride anti-natalism, and Aurora is going to try and change her mind and protect people from this dangerous method of thinking.
Okay, please. Moderator, take it away.
All right. Let's hear the pro anti-natalism position first. So, Marcia, opening remarks.
Okay, let me close this so that I'm not looking at myself constantly. Okay, so if we're looking at anti-natalism, we can come at it quite a few ways. We can look at it from a more practical way, looking at individuals, where if we look at things like climate change, things like this, it's just simply better to have less people being born in the West and also in other regions, simply because we want to try to stop climate change. So from a small level, doing that does help somewhat. If we look at other practical reasons, there's obviously a huge problem right now in the foster care system and the adoption system, where you have people waiting essentially their entire life where they stay in the system because they can't find people to adopt them. So it would actually be better if we had less kids and actually had these people adopting out these people so that they have better life from that extent. Moving on from that kind of short-term practicality, we can look at more of a moralistic thing where people much smarter than me, much smarter than Human or anyone here, have looked into the philosophical arguments for anti-natalism, and it seems like quite a few of them have came to the conclusion that it's simply immoral. So if we look at it, we can go through, for example, more of Peter Singer's argument, looking at, for example, if we look at premise one, if we hold on, sorry about that. I'm using this amazing program called Obsidian that Toyolo introduced me to, and it's dog shit, so I don't know why I'm using it. If I read through it, it says, premise one, we can prevent something bad from happening without sacrificing anything of comparable moral importance, so we ought to do it. Premise two, extreme poverty is bad. Premise three, there is some extreme poverty that we can prevent without sacrificing anything of comparable moral importance. Therefore, we ought to prevent some extreme poverty. And by extension of that, desisting from producing children and redirecting those resources to other things would be good. From that conclusion, we can look at another argument that the presence of pleasure is considered good only when individuals are there to perceive that, whereas the presence of pain is considered bad when it is present, and then when it is not present, it is considered good that is not present. However, pain having good and pleasure being absent is not necessarily considered a negative unless there is an individual there to not have that pleasure. So from that argument, you would look at not introducing someone to the world as, on average, usually being better, because you're removing the existence of the pain that is there, which is a moral good, whereas even though you're removing the moral good, you're not actually producing any badness from that, because there isn't a person anymore to actually produce good there. And then I have quite a few other things responding to human, but I'll get to that in a sec. Looking at my final argument, we can look at the consent argument, where you need informed consent to put someone through substantially high risks or other forms of suffering. Unborn people simply can't consent. Therefore, we would usually fall on some other kind of medical framework, looking at specifically with a source I provided, where you would want to make an evaluated decision whether or not that individual would prefer to have that medical thing done to them. We simply can't know that for an individual being born, and if we look at suicide rates, it seems like quite a few people would prefer not to be born or go through certain kinds of suffering. Therefore, we can't introduce the procedure of becoming alive to individuals. So I'll hand it over to Human.
Well, tell me if my mic, by the way, is good. This thing is like kind of busted as shit, so it could go out and whatever. Awesome, thank you. So, first off, thank you everybody for coming. I think it's super, super cool that we get to have like DGG stuff in like a way bigger stage-like format. There have been people on the server who have been advocating for that for like years now, and like this is actually unironically like the first time it's kind of happening successfully, which is awesome. But aside from that, I think that before we get into it, I'd like to clarify basically my point, or rather like my stance on anti-natalism, sorry. So that just later on there's not that much confusion. So in my time reading about anti-natalism, I have never once found justification for externalizing it as a like moral framework or like a moral view. I think that internally people can definitely weigh the argument with themselves as far as if they would like to participate in the furtherment of the human race. And I think that so long as the species in general isn't like at total risk of extinction, which doesn't really happen until there's like less than like 2,000 people alive, then it's not really an imperative, or people aren't exactly morally obligated to reproduce. But that said, my biggest problem with anti-natalism is that when you're talking about externalizing a moral viewpoint, you're immediately bringing into the fold pragmatism and political capital, or just like, you know, can we do something, and if so, like how likely is it to actually work? And that's my biggest problem with anti-natalism, is that I cannot even think of an ethical way of going about reaching the ultimate ends that logically follow from an anti-natalist externalized perspective. So while we're doing this whole thing, I'd like to ask the judges and the audience to kind of just keep one thing in mind all throughout, which is why should we pursue anti-natalism instead of simply educating people and making it more socially acceptable that people only have children when they are at their best physically, emotionally, mentally, psychologically, and economically. Because after all, I think that despite the fact that we could and should be doing like a lot better of a job at raising our children, we're just the empirics just kind of show that like we're not doing such a bad job that it warrants taking like a societally wide antinatalist position. But yeah, I really just we tried to get a topic for so long, but we agreed on so much stuff. So I'm just really curious how this is gonna go. So yeah, can we get into it?
Absolutely. So we heard a number of arguments from Marcia,
Mhm.
An argument from Singer, an argument from, I believe it was Benatar, who gives the asymmetry argument. So why don't you tackle whichever one of those you'd prefer?
Sure. In my time reading, the biggest one you're gonna find is Benatar. Benatar is like definitely like the guy for kind of, as far as I can tell, kind of really bringing this idea into like I'm not gonna say the forefront of like philosophical debate, but definitely making it a really difficult one to kind of like take apart, because he uses 4 values or 4 judgments, and he uses them on a matrix that's like it kind of just says everything itself. So it should be, or rather, the matrix, which Marcia stated, is that the presence of a good thing is good, the presence of a bad thing is bad, the absence of a good thing is neutral, and the absence of a bad thing is good, right? So in this matrices, we can see that not existing is beneficial. It's the most beneficial, because it comes with the least risks. However, when stating his first judgment, which is the presence of harm is bad, I would argue this should instead read the presence of harm is bad only if the presence of benefit is not greater than that of harm. We see this pretty much every second of every day when it comes to things like cost benefit analysis, which we all do internally, whether we're conscious of it or not, when making a decision. So, as a really small example, when you're like laying in bed thinking like, I want to go turn off the light to get to bed, even though you may not want to get up, you understand at like a very core level that like once you do get up and turn off the light, the reward that you feel overrides that feeling of I don't want to get up. Oh, I'm walking across the room. I have to reach my hand. Like, and we do that pretty much every time we make a decision. Sometimes we can be wrong. Sometimes the ends don't justify the means for our actions, whether we're aware of it or not when going into it. But ultimately, it is really, really important that that we kind of accept that in Benatar's first side of the equation, the presence of harm is only, or the presence of like discomfort, or however you want to phrase it, is only really bad so long as it's overriding all of the good or the pleasure or the positive things that somebody can experience. So this kind of wraps back into what I was saying earlier, is that like why would I not just want to make sure that we decrease the likelihood of somebody having like a painful or unfulfilling or like negative upbringing or childhood or development? Why would I not want to do that? Like, why instead should I tell people don't have kids instead of have kids whenever blank, or don't have kids until blank? Because if we're being honest, many human beings view reproducing as a biological imperative. They're kind of going to do it no matter what. So the only real way to make moral anti-realism like externalized to its fullest extent, in as far as I can tell, would require you to forcefully sterilize the entire human population, thus ensuring its near immediate destruction. So like I don't really understand like how you can like Venatar or not, like I don't really know where you're going with this in terms of externalizing it. Again, I can totally understand you being like, who is it for me to decide that I can bring a moral actor into the world and then raise it to be a near clone of myself? That's like totally understandable. I personally don't think I'm ready, and I don't know when I will be. But in terms of going out and telling people one of two things, either don't have kids until you are at this point and this point and this point and this point, or walking out and telling people don't have kids, I think one of those is far more pragmatically and politically reasonable than the other. But I mean, like, yeah, just let's go.
So we
What you
can
got?
go through.
Mhm.
There was quite a few points there. So if we go through them all. Starting out one, I'm happy that we started off the debate with essentially a complete concession of the more internal philosophical argument, agreeing that maybe it is like correct, like anti-natalism incomplete, but then you've kind of moved the debate to more of a kind of pragmatic side of the argument, which I think is fair. However, if we look at that, I, to me, feel quite happy in saying, if I know I'm correct, of course I'm going to advocate for the pragmatic side of it, or trying to enforce that no matter what. I would hope that individuals that agree with certain things push in their real life, no matter how unpragmatic it is. If we look at, for example, early days of slavery in America, I would hope that people that disagreed vehemently with slavery, even though it was essentially impossible to get rid of slavery at the time, still had people starting, anti-slavery drives, trying to push really hard for it, even though it was essentially impossible at the time. If we look at those pragmatic sides of it, I would say that policy-wise, it would be a slow burn, but I think we can get there eventually. It seems like, on average, people are already slowly tending towards the anti-natalist mindset, with them having kids less often, having kids later in life, trying to make sure that either a lot of the time they don't ever have kids, or B, if they do have kids, they're trying to at least entertain the idea that they know life is going to be suffering, and they're just trying to mitigate that somewhat by leaving it later in life. If we so thinking from that lens, that's already eventually happening.
Can we not? I disagree with that lens fundamentally. I like
That
what.
people are having children less on average.
Oh no, that they're trying to mitigate the ultimate conclusion that is apparently in your mind an inescapable fact that life is suffering. Because
Oh, I
empirically, as far as I've read on the subject, because don't get me wrong, I started this off with, like I said, and by no means was this a concession and saying you are right. It is you possibly could be correct, just as you could possibly be incorrect. Again, in holding this internally. However, I'd say a lot of different things are totally fine internally, or like I give them a pass as far as like I just don't care. And then whenever somebody tries to externalize them is when it becomes a problem. So again, like all the empirics we have sent back and forth, and me coming at this from as wide a lens as I possibly could, considering I didn't know much about anti-natalism going into it, I have only found that over the generations, we are just getting better, just straight up better. We can just
Would you
bring
like to
in
list
as
some of those?
much of. I'm sorry, what?
Would you like to list some of those real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. Okay, so I don't have to waste anybody's time in terms of like pulling those up real quick and minimizing and maximizing apps and stuff like that. Really quick, we can just have one I have jotted down, which is something you sent me, which was interesting, was the Loneliness Index National Report Compliance Reports, which was basically something that highlighted and demonstrated the fact that loneliness is something that Gen Zers are feeling more than previous generations. However, the polling for that, by the way, was done not at the same age. So it wouldn't be a 10-year or like a 20-year-old in 1950 versus a 20-year-old now. It'd be a 20-year-old now versus a 50-year-old or a 70-year-old, right? Which that is kind of a flaw when you're talking about unhappiness, for the reason of this paper points out that, or this report, I should say, points out that having in-person interactions, specifically significant ones with like friends or family, drastically reduces pretty much most, if not every single negative that comes with the loneliness that people feel and the negative health consequences that they suffer because of it. Ones in which, by the way, this points out is like worse than obesity in terms of like your risk to your heart. In terms of longevity of life, you're seeing people, I think it was 40, like below 45, below like 55 is like their average mortality rate. So like this loneliness thing is like a big deal, right? However, it points out that people who have quality time with their friends and family are mitigating pretty much every single aspect of that loneliness. So that mixed with the fact that the polling for this was done to 20-year-olds and 50-year-olds, if you're going to ask me which one I expect to have a family going and around them at all times, it is no question it's not going to be the Gen Zers, okay? Gen Zers don't have families. They don't have kids. They don't have grandkids, right? If you're talking to a 70-year-old, of course they're going to have more family around them. And that is clearly a good thing.
Yeah, I'm quite happy you brought this up. So
Mhm.
looking at the data, you are correct. So looking at older generations, they do for the previous like few years, they did
Mhm.
use older populations, which if anything, I agree is a problem because the difference in loneliness is probably much higher than the survey gives credit. If we look at younger people versus older people usually do have on average higher loneliness levels. If we look at people in nursing homes and other stuff, it's actually quite an epidemic right now that as you get older, you actually get even more lonely. So I agree. I think there is
A
a flaw in the
nursing
study
home is
there.
entirely different than what we're
A
talking
nursing
about. I'm
home
talking
or
about
just
friends and
on
family
average
interactions.
older. Yeah, I think when you get older, usually you see all of your friends and family slowly die. And usually, on average, I would say most normal people would admit that as you get older, you actually get lonelier. When you're younger, you're usually around a lot more people on average. So I agree. I think that the loneliness index, although flawed, probably is underplaying the level of loneliness we currently have. If we actually look at it as well, if we're looking at another source that I show, because loneliness actually does come from a genetic factor, we could actually put forward that because people are slowly getting lonelier from these genetic factors, and it seems like genetically our loneliness is increasing because of these genetic factors, we could only see this increase slowly as we go along. If we look at other social factors, such as, like you said, Gen Zers don't have families. They don't hang out with their friends. So I don't see any possibility of them, once they turn 30, they instantly become baby boomers. I think this trend of them being socially ostracized from other people and being more insulated and having less friends is probably going to continue. And if anything, it's going to be more of a problem. When looking at, for example, one of your sources, listing all of the things that make people happy, it
Mhm.
seems like the main things that made people happy were having children, committing to relationships, having friends and family. And if all of these metrics are going down and they're the most important things, this is obviously a problem. And then
They're not
after
going
that,
down. They're
we had
shifting.
yeah, they're shifting
They
to
shift.
people not having kids and not getting
No,
married and not having as many friends, which seems to be a problem, wouldn't it?
that's
Seems
no.
like
You're completely wrong on the last one specifically. It
on being
specifically is that
married.
they're having more friends. They're having less. What happened was in 2017, Pew Research found that it was about 70% of people mentioned family being the primary reason that they found reason in life or meaning. Right. However, the modern source for that is going to be around like 63%, as far as what people are responding to for that, as opposed to what it was, with what's supplementing it being friendly interactions. And this is hyper specific to the COVID world that we're currently living in, where people are obviously a little more alienated, people are obviously online a lot more. It makes total sense that for the last how long has it been? For the last 2 years and the probably the foreseeable, who knows, probably maybe decade or something, these numbers are going to be a little rough. However, without question, um, life expectancy, overall quality of life, and basically one of the only things we've done to measure like happiness, if you will, which was based on, I should say, GDP, healthy life expectancy, social support, freedom to make life choices, generosity, perception of corruption, positive affect, and negative affect. We find that not only is it only increasing, but only a third of current nations, with the vast majority being sub-Saharan, have a margin that's above the 50% line for the unhappiness, if you will.
So
So
I'm
not only do people
Mhm.
prefer to have a family, not only do people prefer essentially, or I'm sorry, not only is life getting better for people who are continuing to live, and not only is life increasing in terms of its well, basically every beneficial way that we've been able to measure so far within every single generation that has passed. But on top of all of this, you're you're telling
Is
me
this
right
the
now.
social environment study are you referring to?
I believe so. In
Okay, so
terms of, and
I'm glad you
that's for their metrics, of which
yes,
I just pointed out a
yeah,
second ago.
I'm glad you brought this up. So
Mhm.
if we look at those metrics, it seems like on average most countries are actually under 6 when it comes to the happiness index. Um, in general, but then it actually gets far, far worse when we actually dig into these numbers. So if we look at it, the majority of the happiness for most of these countries comes from a metric that they call dystopia plus residual. Dystopia plus residual is actually calculated through things that they say, and I quote, may include things that are negative and positive to happiness, which is quite worrying when the majority of this metric is coming from things that might not actually be making them happy. So looking at that, it would be concerning because if we remove the residual, they drop all down to 4. So I don't see it as a fundamentally happy world when we're sitting around 6 out of 10, or in the worst case, under a 4. If I was to say, hey, do you want to go to a 6 out of 10 movie? I think you would go, no, we'll
So
try to find
hold
a
on.
10
So
out of 10.
your explanation then for what we should do going forward isn't to try to make it better by any means. We should just stop
Oh, we can make it better. Actually, as I've pointed out through
by
several
stopping.
sources. Yeah, so if we actually point to this, we could actually increase the amount of resources that each individual gets by removing these children from coming in.
Resource management is constricting how many children you can have is not only understandable given certain contexts, but something that you could do without exterminating all humans on Earth, right? Within like 100 to 200 years, right?
Yeah,
Taking
and
a moral
yeah.
anti-natalist stance externally to its fullest end would necessarily bring the end of the human race. No?
Yeah, so I'm quite happy you brought this up. And actually, if we look at Betard, he specifically points to this argument as being one of the strongest arguments against anti-natalism, and it's much like other arguments that are essentially feels arguments for things. He puts forward that it strikes me, therefore, that the concern that humans will not exist in a future time, is either a symptom of the human arrogance that our presence makes the world better, or that somehow it's a misplaced sentiment. And actually points also that people looking at, for example, if a comet was to instantly kill everyone, the feeling of us not existing anymore would be as valid there as it is now, because simply put, it's just, oh, I want to keep existing. However, you need to really separate you wanting to keep existing from just humanity continue to exist, because it's
Yeah,
quite
in
arrogant
our
to think that you're
yeah.
going to live forever, you know.
No, no, no. In our observable universe, there is nothing that can impact the universe around it like human beings can. As far as we are aware, we are the most intelligent species that this planet, or even potentially our galaxy, has ever seen. And we have no idea of determining whether or not that would be a we'll ever see kind of conclusion to that. As
And
such, I think it is
humans
a really, really important thing to have sentient life observing the universe in some capacity. I think it's really cool. I don't even need to moralize it necessarily as saying it's a good or a bad thing. I think it's kind of morally neutral, to be honest with you. It's just the universe making chaos, right? But humans have the unique perspective of getting to watch it, observe it, and comprehend it like nothing else we've ever seen has. And I think that's kind of cool. I think that's cool enough for me to say that I would feel kind of bad if the human race went extinct, personally.
Yeah,
However, I think that, not even I think, metrically speaking, we have a lot of things that are pointing in the direction of multi-generationalism being really, really good. In pretty much every measurable way. So like as every generation goes on, life just gets better. It's kind of crazy. So it seems to me like the best thing we should do is just kind of improve as we go, as we've been doing for the past few dozen thousand years, and seeing what the outcomes come to. Because if you want to bring up climate change, that's one thing. And while I do believe in a lot of, not believe in, while I do agree with a lot of like the literature that I've read on like climate change and like how alarming it can be currently and how like it seems like we're heading in a really bad place. I also acknowledge that culturally and socially, the world's kind of like turning on a dime every day now, and it's getting to a point of like a near hyper accelerationism in pretty much any given direction, depending on what flavor people are feeling that week. So I'm more inclined. So if you were to tell me that why would you bring like a child into the world if like global warming will just have us all dead in like 200 years? I would pose to you that it's probably equally likely that like Shaquina Aquafina becomes like the world's best pop star and biggest, most like popular influencer of all time, and like drastically, radically changes the way that most people think about like climate change. So much so that we all become vegan overnight. Like I am more willing to believe that than the extinction of the human race within like 100 years. And I understand the literature, I really do. I'm just saying humans are really, really good at surviving. So, like, me personally, I am under the impression that if you were to go out into the world right now, outside of your door, Marcia, if you were to go and ask people, hey, like, make sure it's a crowd, by the way, so you get like a good sample size, right? And you ask them, hey, like, would you rather have never been born? I think you're going to get a resounding no a lot of the time. And I think there's a reason for that. And I don't even think that that reason is necessarily irrational, or even if it is, I don't think it's like really up to you or me to try to like moralize that as a good or bad thing, right? Because the way I see that is the equivalent of like if you were to pop off a ship in like the 1600s in like North America and then see people living in like tree huts and like start being, you know what I mean, and being like they don't really understand how bad they have it. I mean, they,
So
they really don't get it. They may think they're happy, but they're not actually happy.
I'll try to address all of these
Mhm.
points. First off, I think it's quite strange to say humans have like the most power to influence the universe, which is quite crazy to me when a quasar could just destroy the universe and kill everyone, whereas
Oh
humans
no, of
can't even like
species we
go to-
are
go to
able to
Mars.
observe currently.
Yeah,
That's
we're
without
okay.
question
If you're
true.
just talking about observation,
biological
I don't know.
power,
We can leave like a camera around if you care about like just viewing stuff for some reason. I think a lot of things are really cool. Doesn't mean I think they're moral. We can go through a few other things, just talking about things getting better. It seems that things are getting better. However, it seems that it's just if we get rid of someone with making sure they don't get born, that's also good. It seems like we can instantly get to the root of the issue like that. So maybe it's a different perspective. As a psychologist, I usually try to, instead of putting band-aids on things, I want to like find the root of the issue and fix that. So that hopefully we could do that by making sure that people aren't born.
So
If
if
we
we
go
hold on,
through,
can we talk about
no,
the
I need
non-existent part of Minotaur?
I need to go through these things. What
Yeah,
was
go
the
for it.
last thing you said? Sorry. Oh,
What
yeah, I got to it. So if we look at seeing the mud huts or whatever, I think most Native Americans actually lived in complex civilizations. They weren't living in mud huts or anything. But putting that to the side, I think during the age of slavery, I would want to fight for that, and I wouldn't just say, looks like things are getting better, so we won't have slavery eventually. I think we should be pushing for, hey, we need to stop it now, like right now. We need to like fix this issue as fast as possible. And if we're talking about real life examples, we want to appeal to that. I actually am an anti-natalist in real life. I've convinced quite a few people through my activism work, actually pushing people to adopt instead of having kids. I think my specific organization has got over 250 something, I don't know the exact number, people to actually, instead of having kids, they use our related adoption service to actually get kids, and that's some regular anti-natalism, sorry, activism that can actually work in the real world, helping people to, instead of have kids, just adopt one or something like that. If people really, really like want to make their own thing, then I obviously can't stop them right now, but again, I also can't stop slavery from happening. If we're talking about humans quote unquote surviving, slavery has also survived. It's really good at continuing. So I'm pretty sure there's more slaves right now than any time in human history, even as a percentage. But I would still say, hey, even though it's hiding under rocks and it's really hard to snuff out, we should still try to do the right thing and fix these issues by not having kids, stopping slavery, stopping all these things, right?
Okay, so this is an example that we talked about in DMs a little bit, but I'd really like to kind of touch on it a second before I get to what I view as like the non-existent perspective of Benatar's matrix, right? So really quick, if there is a let's say a really wealthy, really successful, very emotionally stable person in like some kind of loving relationship or something, who is like a really good moral actor and they're really smart and all that kind of stuff. Although I personally would not say, hey, you should have a kid, why should they not have a kid?
Oh, so they shouldn't have a kid because they are putting an individual that can't consent to a procedure into dangerous world where they don't actually have a good percentage or knowledge whether or not they'll actually be okay. So putting aside even that essentially you're raping this person by bringing them into existence without consent. After you've raped them and brought them into existence, then you're rolling the dice on whether or not they're good. I can say, hey, I'm upper middle class. I'm sure my baby will be okay. And then I have the kid and they just have a congenital disease that puts them in pain perpetually throughout their entire life. When I could have just not rolled the dice, not raped this person, not, destroyed their entire future by creating their future. It seems
If you were to
just
talk,
weird.
if you were to talk to like a severely physically disabled person who is like that from birth, and you ask them, "Are you happy with your life? Do you wish you'd never been born?"
A lot of them
They
would
said, "No, I
probably
am
say
happy."
they would rather not be born. Quite
Really?
a lot of
Do you have any
people, yeah,
empirics on that?
disabled people on average. Well, I don't actually have empirics. However,
Mm.
I would guess. Are you saying that disabled people wouldn't, on average, have higher like suicide rates? Are you saying that they have normal suicide rates? Which is quite to me that would be pretty bad because I
Higher
think a
would be
normal
one
person would
thing,
admit
but
that, right?
but higher would be one thing. But if you're talking about like, do I think that like the majority of like disabled people would wish or actively wish that they had never been born? I would say, to be honest with you, no. And the reason for that is because just like my requirements for having having a child, sorry, just like that being, if you're in like the best emotional circumstances that you've ever been, the best physical health, mental health, all that kind of stuff, right? Material benefit, all that kind of stuff. Then in that case, so long as you accept the burden that is to come or the challenge that is to come with having somebody who needs a chaperone for the rest of their life, so long as you're willing to accept that, I think going against that would be. And by the way, when I say that, I mean their intent to carry on with the pregnancy. I think that that would be a violation of bodily autonomy and liberty, and I don't
Yeah,
see
so
an ethical
it's
path to kind of get around that.
Yeah, so it's hard to violate someone's bodily autonomy when they don't exist. It's quite funny that we're talking about bodily autonomy when you are fundamentally going against someone's bodily autonomy by creating that body. They were nothing, and you forced them into the world
No,
without
you
their
have a
consent.
biological
I would also,
imperative
I would,
to
I would, I
reproduce
would
on a
also like
cellular
to
level.
cite that it's
Like, what do
quite
you? What does
interesting
that
that you
mean?
bring this
Bodily
up.
autonomy.
It's quite interesting they bring this up with the number one happiness, like with all of your sources. A lot of these sources are pointing to places like Sweden and other such places that actually hold the view on disabled people that if they are disabled, they should be able to be aborted instantly. So it seems like the people that you
Hold on.
agree with
Hey, stop right
on
there. Stop.
increasing
Hold on,
happiness seem to
Marcia.
want to remove
Marcia.
disabled people as well.
Marcia, hold on. Go back for a sec.
Mhm.
Say what you just said again after you said, funny you mentioned that, blah, 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 Sweden, right? Continue from there. Real
Oh,
quick.
I said that some of your sources seem to point to the happiness in Sweden,
Mhm.
seem to point to these happy societies, and it seems like these happy societies have this on the back of things like assisted suicide, or in the case of places like Sweden,
Did you not
by
say
removing disabled people
Did you not say
by
the
aborting them.
ability to? Is that correct?
Mhm.
Did you not say the ability to remove?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
ability
so
as
much
in
like
removing
bodily
them, yeah.
autonomy, like I just
Mhm.
said a second ago, okay, like abortion, for instance, like that is a personal matter of bodily autonomy and liberty, right? The freedom to make one's choices about their own life decisions, right?
Mhm.
That would be something you would have to override to get to a point, or rather the logical conclusion of antinatalism. Again, when externalized. I think that if you want to ask people, hey, maybe you shouldn't have a kid. Maybe you should adopt. Maybe maybe we're in a rough time economically, or energy crisis, something, right? Maybe it's best if you don't have a kid or something. Maybe you should just adopt or something like that. I think it's totally fine, Marcia. And again, I don't have a problem with that up until the point of like the endangerment of like the species dying out or something, right? However, if you were to just outright blanket statement just tell people straight up you're not having a kid because you're raping that child who's unborn, okay? Then if that's the case, there is no possible way, there's no world, there's no universe where you win that in the long game politically.
Yeah,
Realistically, you're just not.
I'm sure that if I was in ISIS held territory and I said, "Hey, you shouldn't be able to rape your wife," there would be no world whatsoever
Okay, so
where I would win
you're
that
really
argument
stuck up
either.
on this rape thing of like the whole
Mhm.
unborn infant thing. So
I
let's
would
hold on. So let's go.
I
Hold
would
on.
have
Hold on,
that
wait. So
destroyed,
let's
yeah.
go to the non-existent part of Minotaur's
Mhm.
Matrix. Okay. If the absence of benefit is not bad unless there is someone for whom it is deprived from, then how can the absence of harm be good if there is nobody to enjoy it?
So the absence. Well, could you repeat that? The absence
Yeah,
of
if
harm.
the absence of benefit is not bad unless there is someone for whom it is deprived from, you would agree. So you would not kill a person who is alive today, right? That'd be bad. However, not being born, not bad, right? That's what you said, right? Or that's Benatar's whole fucking thing, right? Okay.
Yep.
Then, how can the absence of harm be good if there is nobody to enjoy it?
How can
You're
the
sitting
absence-
here content with yourself that you
How can the
saved a
absence
baby
of
from being
harm
raped
be-
by being born into this world. And I'm asking you, if that thing doesn't exist, are you really helping it?
Oh, so you've brought it into existence. So the person that is there to enjoy the harm that I'm referring to is the person that was just brought into the existence. I think if we continue with the rape kind of analogy here, if we have a person that is unconscious and if someone rapes them, right? Continue. The harm is created when I tell them, hey, you were raped when you were unconscious. And a lot of people would say, hey, it's better to not know. Just like I would say, it's better to not come into existence. It seems like the harm is being created when, in the rape case, you are giving them that new information, and the individual is being harmed, raped by bringing them into existence after you've brought them into existence. The rape is their entire life. The person that is experiencing their entire life is the person being raped because that life exists.
Okay, let's see.
It's like if I create an AI and give it sentience and I just torture it for the rest of the life. The AI is there because I'm torturing it for the rest of the life. Because I've created the torture machine, just like someone giving birth has created the torture baby.
Okay, so let's see if you can keep with the rape analogy on this one, okay? So alternatively, if the absence of harm can be good if there's nobody to enjoy it, then why can't the absence of benefit be bad in the same way?
It would just be quite weird to talk about pain or a benefit in that way. So if I was to be like, hey, there
That's
is
the way
a need.
Benatar directly states it, so I don't. Why would that be weird?
He directly states that the absence of harm
Mhm.
is a good thing because the
Mhm.
harm's not there, whereas the absence of good is. So the difference between that is obviously having the absence of harm be gone is specific to anyone. It's a harm that is on average everything. And then if we have the pleasure thing, if we were to use some kind of like talking thing, if I was to say that a torture machine exists and it tortures people would probably say that's bad. Whereas if I was to say, hey, a good ice cream doesn't exist, most people would say, I don't know. If I was to say there's a carrot ice cream that nobody likes, but is really pleasurable to people that like carrot ice creams, it just wouldn't really make sense, would it?
Well, so
no, but the
Marcia,
multi-generational
the question being put to you isn't about a harm that exists that someone is experiencing. It's about what's the justification for saying that the absence of harm is good. Like if you have the absence of a harm, right? So there's nothing there to experience it, but the absence of the harm is still good. I think that's the question. So examples like these hypothetical examples where there is someone there to experience the harm, I think aren't addressing that point.
Okay, so I would need to go through Benatar's specific example where he calculates it. I would assume human read through his argumentation and would understand his methodology on it. If I was to just try to sum it down in my view, if we were to look at someone if I was to pose to you two different realities, and we were to have, I'm going to create someone to exist with harm being done to them, you would probably say it's good that doesn't exist. Probably, I would hope. And then if I was to put you, hey, you have two realities, one where someone eating an ice cream happily exists, and one where someone eating an ice cream happily exists, I would probably say, oh, that's good that that person exists. But if I was to say it doesn't exist, you would probably, I would hope, humans say, oh, that's fine. Like, it doesn't really matter. Otherwise, I would assume you would be against most abortion, considering it removes people's ability to have that happiness, wouldn't it be? Like, if I abort my child at like 2 weeks,
bodily autonomy, and I think it's neutral bringing something into the world, whereas I think it is almost equally neutral to not do so. Again, up until the extinction of the series, the fucking species. But you're not talking about that, luckily. So I don't even have to say that. So yeah, I think it's totally neutral to not have a kid. Just like I think it's totally neutral to have a kid. The only thing that really matters here is something that I mentioned toward the beginning, which is if in life, right, you only really have to go through, or rather, the presence of suffering is only a really, really big deal if it outweighs the presence of pleasure, right? So if you were to tell me that I'm going to give birth to this thing and then just torture it forever and ever and ever, it will never know happiness, then yes, in that situation, it would make sense that you just don't do it. However, I can quite literally, outside of almost immediate death upon birth, think of an example that could happen in. Realistically, people exist, and the suicide rate, by the way, globally is below 10%, for the reason of people have things that make them happy in life. Even if they have a lot of suffering, they find things that make them happy, like friends or family or creation is another one. Creative output into the world in terms of small projects or something. And because of that, I'm asking you, how is it not that realistically, in the non-existent side of Benatar's matrix, how is it not neutral? Considering, as I posed before, if the absence of harm can be a good thing and there's nobody to enjoy it, then why can't the absence of benefit be the same way? Because if you were to tell me I'm going to make a universe where there is no I don't know, I like Kendrick Lamar or something. If you're there's no Kendrick Lamar, I'd be like, that fucking sucks, right? I'd immediately be like, that sucks. That provides a lot of benefit for me, right? That guy being alive, right?
It just seems like you're not entertaining it, because if I was to say there's a random person named Jerry on the moon and they come into existence and they live the rest of their life just eating an ice cream happily, and then I pose another reality where they don't exist, why would you say the reality where Jerry doesn't exist is bad?
What do you mean? Because somebody is happy. You're in my opinion, you're trying to be an arbiter of what is actual happiness. Of you are the person who could walk up to somebody in any given time period, no matter the situation. So let's just take it all the way back, right? So let's say a cave person, and he's got his club, and he's got a thing of meat on the fire, and he's got not clean drinking water, and he's laying on a rock to go to bed. And you're like, that looks fucking miserable. You must be so pissed. Let's just say he could speak English for a sec, and he'd be like, no, I'm actually totally fine with this. You're trying to tell me that this person is wrong. That them being in the world is actually no, they don't know what they're talking about.
So
they're not actually experiencing happiness. It'd be equal if they just didn't exist. And I'm telling you, you're wrong.
There's probably some issues here where because I'm not a philosopher, I'm not great at putting forward his argument. I'm sure he could do it better. However, if I was, again, I don't know what your obsession is with saying Africans are playing with rocks and don't speak English or anything, but putting that aside, if we look at my argument in its totality, it would seem that I would remove a philosopher that I seem to be having trouble giving their argument for. I could put that to the side, and all we would be left with is a practical version of anti-natalism, which is simply putting good things into the world, which I think we would both agree would be good things that you would probably do yourself. Yep. So you're okay with a more practical version.
Why do you think that?
And then we would have a philosophical version of it, where again, I still think that I value consent fundamentally, and I don't know why you're unconsensually bringing people into the world. We can talk about
we can in the practicality approach.
On the practicality approach, I think if I went up to Benetard and said, "Hey, I'm trying to make people not have kids by making them adopt," I think Benetard probably would agree, because as far as I'm aware, Benetard agrees with the slow die out version, which is where people simply stop having kids and then slowly they continue living until humanity dies out. So I think he would be very for my practical version.
In the grand scheme of things, right?
Well, I mean, it would be 3-4 generations. I think if I was to have a down me and Benetard having a beer, I'm sure he would probably even concede, hey, we're probably not going to get anti-nativism within the next 200 years. Just I'm sure if I sat down a lot of anti-slavery people in the 1700s, they would probably be like, hey, probably not going to free all the slaves. but we should probably try now so that eventually we can get there.
Okay.
So yeah, I just, it seems like one of my arguments you disagree with, and I seem to maybe not track very well, but I still am left with a practical one that you agree with, and essentially one that I would hope you agree with, which is we shouldn't do things against people without their consent, which you somewhat seem sympathetic to because you aren't okay with people's bodily autonomy being infringed on. And I think fundamentally, if you're bringing someone to existence without asking them or without consenting, you've already done them a disservice by taking away their bodily autonomy, by creating them without their consent whatsoever.
So something that a lot of people find happiness in, multi-generationalism, the thing that's perpetuating humanity in a positive direction in every single metric that we can foresee and observe. You think that is a bad thing based on the fact that somebody who is existing, who's choosing to undergo a cellular reproductive process in their own body, by the way, who they're very happy with the outcome of, by the way, pretty much every time. You're telling me that is a bad thing, correct?
So
because we do not agree on that. Furthermore, when you said a practical aspect of anti-natalism, no. When I thought you were addressing what I had said pretty much at the get-go, which is essentially just pushing for better education to not have kids until certain, not even really certain, but just like better requirements are met. Raising your kids better in better circumstances for better outcomes. You think Benatar would... I would think that he would disagree with that. I would think that he would say, no, it needs to be more drastic. We can't just do a better job and negate the possibility of bad outcomes in the real world, right? We can't just make the world a place where anything born into the world doesn't experience negativity. No, we have to go all the way in ensuring that even if there's 0.01% chance of negativity happening, that's still enough reason for something to never exist. Is that correct?
So if we look, hold on, let me get the exact quote from Benatar, so just so that I'm using it correctly.
One moment here. We've got about 10 minutes left, so let's shift into sort of our closing arguments before our final statements.
Yeah, I'll just finish this and let them respond, and then we can move into that. But if I quote the exact thing that Benatar does agree with, if we look at the quote from Sophocles, which is some ancient philosopher that I'm sure nobody cares about except for Benatar himself, because he specifically researches this person and brings them up. He says, "Never to be born is the best, but if we must see the light, the next best thing is to quickly return to whence we came. When the youth departs with all its follies, who does not stagger unto evil, who escapes them?" And then he follows up to talk about how essentially we have the best, and he's actually showing that he categorizes these things in a long order, where obviously never being born, so based. And then, secondly, then people should die as quickly as possible. Get out of there. And then he talks about specifically evaluating other things like, hey, if we're trying to get there as soon as possible, I don't think Benatar's going to come out and say, yeah, we should fucking suffer everyone and cause pain. He would probably agree because he's trying his hardest to stop all human suffering by killing everyone, which is his whole fundamental idea. Of course he would be okay with making people happy in the interim. I'm okay with making people happy. I would say everyone that's adopted a kid instead of having a baby, probably happier for it because they think, yeah, me save kid.
Do you think that, well, clearly that runs out pretty fast, doesn't it, if nobody's making kids? But aside from that, do you think that sentient conscious life is morally valuable in any way?
So I have several different beliefs conflicting because obviously I have different levels of belief. I have my personal belief,
Yeah, one that
religious
takes like
belief.
8 minutes or less.
8 minutes or less. So I do personally really like individuals existing just because I like interacting with them. However, if I was never born, I wouldn't have that belief. I wouldn't have to deal with all this suffering. So if anything, if I didn't exist, wouldn't care about human life either because I wouldn't exist.
Do you not find it funny that at the end of this whole thing that you and Benatar would be pushing for, and no matter how long it takes, let's say it takes like 200 years for full social acceptance and the eventual eradication of the human race, do you not find it funny that there would be no concept of suffering without humans alive?
Yeah, there would be no concept of suffering.
Of anything, really.
Yeah,
That's like the weird part, right?
Yeah,
so the
I
thing you're
would
trying to
be
negate,
happy.
right? As well as everything that is positive that goes along with it. All of it disappears. It doesn't necessarily get negated in other ways, right? There still could be, what we view today as like immoral acts happening somewhere in nature, right? It just wouldn't happen to humans. Don't you think that's like a little bit? It's like a little bit kind of like self-serving, just a little bit selfish, kind of, just
I
to be
thought you were a
like.
moral anti-realist. Do you think without humans there would be like some like I don't know weird utilitarian suffering machine? Because I don't
No, I'm
believe
just
in that.
saying, like, why would I have a moral view, right? When I use morals to like make society better and like push humanity in like a better direction and like going forward, right? Why would I have a moral view that ultimately brings the end of all morals?
Well, so the idea, if we're just talking about like practical view, that would just be based on like some happiness thing. I want people to probably have a good life while they exist,
Mhm.
and I
And
don't
what if
think
I have a good
that's.
life by reproducing?
Oh, if you have a good life by reproducing, I would
Mhm.
hold you on the same level as someone that has a good life by raping babies. So I probably would be
Interesting.
against both.
Interesting. So if you right now went out and you asked, let's say, as many as you want, children, do you think do you think your parents have raped you by bringing you into the world? Do you think that you will ever get a response that's mirroring what you're picturing in your head right now?
Um, I would say that a lot of people, just like in
They just don't
17,
know, right?
if I went up to people in
Okay. Okay.
1753 and said,
Okay.
"Hey, do you think black people are human?"
Huh?
They would probably say,
Right.
"They ain't
Hmm.
human, son,"
No,
and
yeah,
say
I
that
get
they
you.
should be whipped
I
and
know.
beaten,
It's
right?
cool. You've done the slavery thing. We got it. I got it. We're out of time, which fucking sucks. I wish we could
it's
keep
just
going.
weird that you haven't like entertained it once. It seems like you're okay in one instance of saying, well, it might be true, but we can't do it. But obviously, I would hope in any other instance you wouldn't
Oh
hold this
no,
view.
it's not. It might be true. We can't do it. This is totally fine so long as not literally everybody believes in it. For the reason of, I don't like the annihilation of the human race personally, and we can talk about that later at a different debate if this ends in like a tie or some shit. Okay, but like, yeah, I hate to tell you this, but like, as every single metric that we have found in terms of the multi-generational success of humans, as well as every single measurable statistic that we have in terms of how great life is currently, it's only getting better. And I'm only advocating that we increase or accelerate how better it's getting. Whereas you're asking for the ultimate end of all of it.
Yeah.
I can't look at so much progress over so many thousands of years. It's like you've never opened like a history book or some shit, right? Where like there's so much progress that we've been doing for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, and you're just like, man, fuck that shit. That's baby rape. It's so fucking stupid. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Anyways,
I'm sure. Hey,
I'm being dumb right now. I'm sorry.
if I
Let's
did the
uh,
slavery thing, I'm sure that a lot
so
of people would be like,
we're
"Hey, all
getting
those
to the end
slaveries
of
have done a
our
lot of work."
time here. So I think Aurora, since you gave the last remarks here, Marcia, if you'd like to give your closing statements first.
Okay. It would seem that in general, this debate has been about a lot of differing views in general. Obviously, anti-natalism is quite a provocative thing. That's why it's one of the main arguments against it, being like, oh, that's bad. People hold this view for like, I don't know, they think poop is scary, so they don't want to like sprinkle it on their like food, even though it's like organic or whatever. Or they like say they dislike black people, so they don't want to see them, they don't want to talk about it. So in general, I think if we look at just the base core arguments used, it seems like the practicality has been agreed on. The debate opened up with, hey, I probably maybe agree with this, or at least I'm neutral. It seems like it's also ended with, hey, it's okay if you hold that view, which means the view mustn't be that reprehensible if you're okay with lots of people having it, just not quote everyone. And it seems like the only argument that wasn't defeated, simply objected to, which is the main one, was just maybe I could walk that back, and then we're left with the final argument being the consent one, which maybe we just disagree on what consent is. I think that like making sure someone exists, and that's obviously you're doing something to their bodily autonomy because they exist. Like you're making them exist when they wouldn't have. So I don't know. Maybe I think 2 out of my 4 arguments have been defeated, and the other 2 have been agreed upon. I think that's fine. I'm happy with ending the debate there. That's fine.
So like I said toward the beginning, I have not heard a single way where this ends in a good outcome as far as my and what I believe to be the majority of people hold to be morally good. I think that while you are definitely, I understand,
The
and I think the
majority.
better way of saying instead of agree with is I sympathize with the fact that yes, damage mitigation is by all means a good thing. I am pushing for damage mitigation in a much more agreeable way. Whereas, again, it is to my belief that pretty much no matter what circumstances, so long as one person has one sex organ and the other has the opposite, they are going to make a kid. They've been doing it forever, pretty much across all species as well. So, again, I just, like, I understand where you're coming from a little bit better, and I understand that you are really dug into like the Benatar Trench, but I just don't think that I think that you are very confident in your argument. I think that's great, but I don't think you've demonstrated, at least to me, adequately so, that the moral conclusions of Benatar's ideas get us anywhere positive. And if the difference in agreement or disagreement is that you think the annihilation of the human race is like a good thing, that's totally fine. I would typically not even bring that up because I think that sounds really kind of like insane, right? That sounds like I'm painting it really, really badly. But you've all but agreed to that at this point, so like I really just don't because I know I value autonomy. I know you value sentient life. Like I know you value people who are living currently today. So I don't understand how you can't kind of allow people to make that choice as far as continuing the species, whereas I just allow them to just do it if they want, but again, do it safely, do it in the best possible way you can, and hopefully we get the best outcomes that we can. But I guess that's it.
All right, thank you for those closing remarks, both of you.
Majority.
Okay. So, we this was a close one. I can assure you. The judges were split, and for a long time, sitting on the fence as to who would win. So I'll read out the votes. We have Algomancer voted Aurora. We have J Moss voted Marcia. We have Toyola here, also voted Marcia. We have Loken voted Aurora, meaning we had to have a tiebreaker, which just happened to be me, and I voted for Marcia. Marcia, you win. You made it. Nice work.
You're going to Hollywood.
The human race is doomed. So
we're all the victims of rape, and Marcia's moving on to next week.
Yeah.
I'm an anti-natalist, by the way. I just want to say that.
Okay. So we'll give you both time to shout yourselves out and let people know where to find you. We'll start with Aurora.
Yeah, I will probably continue Twitch again at some point in the near future. But that said, if you ever want to talk or whatever, just hit me up in Discord or something, because that's probably where you're gonna find me, like closest to now. But yeah, it was fun. So thanks. I'm sad that I didn't do a good job, but I tried.
You did a great job.
Yeah,
it was
no, you did a
actually
good
really,
job.
really hard.
Yeah.
Very hard. Like actual 12-minute tiebreaker session had to be had.
Only
between
if
the
you
judges.
mean that. Okay.
Yeah, no, we actually do mean that. They're like the DMs, just a whole list. Like, I'm not sure who's gonna win.
It's very back and forth.
Yeah.
I also love Marcia, by the way. She's a fantastic person,
Yeah, love
and
you
I think that this whole
let's not
conversation
get carried
brings
away.
out really weird stuff that people are typically not comfortable with hearing about other people. But like, trust me, Marcia is a very smart, very good person who means super well. And yeah.
Okay. Let's go, Marcia, our champion. Any words about that? And then, of course, I'll tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, thanks to Gola and everyone just for putting this together. It's obviously interesting seeing everyone debate. Looking forward to the Stanley debate that's coming up next. I'll probably start Twitch streaming again when I might figure out the VTubing stuff, just because I'm not okay with actual camera stuff now that I'm trans or whatever. But yeah, hopefully everything goes well. And look forward to debating human again. You can just find me on Discord, Ozfox or whatever. That's fine.
Oh yeah, I guess mine would be human on Discord, but.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. All right. We will see you all later, and we'll bring in the next few people. Everyone, if you're enjoying the content, hit that follow button. First of all, if you haven't done so yet, hit that follow button. We're going to be doing this for the next few weeks. And of course, there's going to be a winner at the end, right? So there's prize money on the table, 1.2K. For whoever makes the top. So this isn't the last podcast. If you just happen to stumble upon here, yes, we're doing a debate tournament. So hit that follow button to be a part of that. And make sure notifications are on. I'm on 7 nights a week, but we'll be doing this.
I'm pretty sure we're the biggest cash prize on Twitch for debate tournaments too.
Yeah.
Like I don't think anybody out there is doing a $1,200 debate contest. Like it's only on PrimeCayes' channel.
Number one, right? So be so kind, help us out, and follow the channel. Also, Xmetro Social in chat to keep track of all of this and more. So follow us on Twitter. This up on Discord, where all of this happens. Heart and Soul of the community. Be a part of our Discord, and of course YouTube is where if you missed anything, you can find it there. Like, comment, subscribe. Consider becoming a YouTube member, hitting that join button, helping us out that way. And also subscribe to this channel. That helps. Hit the sub button or gift bits or gift subs. Thank you to the people who gifted before. Special shout out to SD Ultra. Get the 20 subs. Shout out to you. Hey, thank you, right? And everyone else who helped out during that hype train too, like Parasocial, and is it Some Ordinary Aussie? There's a few people, so thank you all. And the anonymous person, everyone who's supporting this channel, it allows me to do this for all of you. So thank you to the people who are helping us out. All right, moving on. Let's bring in the next crew, right? Okay, all right. Hello, hi. Thanks.
Hello.
Hey, thanks for being here, all of you. All right. Jay, do you got cameras?
I do not. No.
Okay. All right.
This one's gonna be cam off.
Okay. All right. So we have two individuals. Do you, Toyla, want to introduce the topic?
Yeah, so as we go into the future, voting and the security of our elections is going to be a big concern for everybody, right? And the world of electronic voting is pretty scary, but Stanley is here to kind of help people ease into the mindset of accepting it, while J-Boz is here to say no. He has a deep-seated no feeling towards electronic voting. He thinks it's too complicated, and he's here to attack it.
Okay. Moderator, please take it away.
All right. I believe Stanley is taking the pro e-voting position. So why don't we hear your opening statement at this time?
Yeah, so the topic is the U.S. should implement electronic voting, and I've been identified as the affirmative. So basically what I'm going to be arguing tonight is hopefully that a unified federal system of voting that includes electronic voting, or let's just kind of cut to the chase and say internet voting or electronically distributed structures of voting and vote counting are, let's say, a net benefit in the United States as a project. And so what I'd like to stress first off is that any implementation of this is not going to happen necessarily tomorrow, right? But that this would be, on a federal level, something that a government like one of the United States could invest the proper resources in foundationally creating a security structure that could eventually give us a lot of useful benefits when it comes to ultimately democratizing, and also address a lot of issues that are kind of inherent to the U.S. as a structure of federal voting already, right? So we already, I mean, I think the public and the judges are going to be fairly well acquainted with the fact that a voter enfranchisement, let's say, or disenfranchisement is an issue at both the federal and state level, given that states are, operating voter rolls, polling places, that those fall under the jurisdiction of states that might, through, let's say, party affiliation and party structure, seek to disenfranchise people through physical means, meaning just making voting far too difficult to personally attend, right? Whether through work or long lines or a lack of funding, something like that, right? And that e-voting, or a structure of e-voting where you can either do it from your home computer or your phone, right? The ubiquity of the cell phone that has an internet connection is by far one of the kind of biggest positives in terms of creating a structured and secure voting structure that doesn't include all of the physical limitations and could supersede perhaps the state apparatus in ways that allow for greater democratization. And secondarily, right, could allow for new structures of democratization at large, right? Meaning that with this possibility, referenda as a whole and personal representation as a whole could be more heavily integrated into a political structure. And I hate to say it, but I think that's one of the big issues that's facing the United States at the moment, right? When you look at issues like undecided or non-participating voters, one of the problems is they do not feel represented either by elected officials or by the structure itself, right? And referenda might be a way at addressing that. So I do think, before I let my opponent speak here, I've got a couple more little things. I do think that this conversation is going to be dominated, unfortunately, by the discussion on security. Not to preempt him too much, but I would like to frame this in the way that I think neither of us are actual security experts, that this is not necessarily going to be something that we can just outright snap our fingers and solve. The idea that we could present to you, or that the affirmative, for instance, could present to you a fully contained structure that doesn't have any kind of security issues or backdoors in the span of an hour, right, is probably not something that we're going to be able to do. But what I can do is address some of those structures directly. I can address some of the sources that my opponent has provided, right? And then we can see if those are actually representative and unique to electronic voting, or if they are, generally speaking, problems of anonymity of voting security at large, and therefore are better addressed by the structure of e-voting as opposed to paper voting, right? And I would insist that there are some, regardless, right, being that those two things are equal, that there do exist parallels between them, I would say that there are going to be some pretty vast pros on the side of a kind of appified voting, right? A central or decentralized structure by which votes could be obtained from individuals at large in the public, where we don't need to necessarily universally convene at physical points to do voting. And with that, I'm going to give it over to my opponent. This is mostly, I think, going to be kind of a responsive from my side.
All right, thank you. J-Buzz, your opening remarks, please.
So, electronic voting overall presents a dilemma, not only in the security involved with the way that we handle our elections, but it also infringes upon some fundamental aspects of our, well, I guess the design of which we built our election system around. Electronic voting is kind of a method that I don't really get, it's difficult to understand why we would bother. Considering the fact that all it's really doing is supplementing a system in which is the way that we handle it now, not only more secure, it's also capable of being audited, which is really important. And it also has a far broader range of public trust. We live in an era where political divisiveness leads to rhetoric that can be unsubstantiated, but still effective in causing a disruption not only in our elections, but also within our court systems. As it stands, we use a decentralized system for voting. So, crypto bros, I'm sorry, we've already done it. We do not have like a federal central body that governs the means of voting across the country. In fact, as years continue, the rights of voters is consistently being eroded at the federal level. This leaves it in solely the hands of the states, which have proven that they have mishandled numerous instances of electronic voting, as well as proven that they tend to enact actions and policies that are more befitting to their respective political leanings. Electronic voting, of course, is a security nightmare, but the even more possible danger is the way in which electronic voting, in recent years especially, including the 2020 election, is technically is weaponized by the opposition in this case to try and sow public doubt in the validity of our elections. It presents a clear and present danger, I would say, to the future of our elections. As much as we want to dream of this unified system, which would be, I don't know how in God you would ever hope to construct that. But in the reality we live in now, we have to contend with a few things that are incredibly important to us in voting. As far as logistics go, as far as tabulation goes. And electronic voting, despite being immeasurably more expensive than paper voting, fails to provide like benefits in the areas that are most important, and does not really aid anybody in becoming able to access voting more than they were before.
All right, thank you
Okay.
for that statement. Stanley, would you like to
Hold on, I'm
respond
gonna,
to any of those points?
I'm filling up my water bottle real quick. Hold on. We are on mobile, so I'm using the advantage of that physical mobility to get some water. Okay, so so let's respond. Let's just go point by point in what J Braw's brought up. So first off, it seems like the question of why bother is kind of is a little bit fundamental to what I'm arguing here, and we're gonna address that by addressing a point that's kind of later down the road in what seems to be a little bit of a broad critique, let's say, right? And that's the decentralized nature of the current structure of voting in the United States. And I would say that this is precisely one of the things that a federal structure that includes electronic voting would seek to address, right? I think when we look at voting state by state or even county by county in the United States, right? A lot of the failures of the structure to do even basic operations of voting, meaning counts, right? Reliable voting systems, right? You have the famous hanging Chad incident in 2020, but these are really common. I mean, essentially any federal election will have some dispute that necessitates a court intervention, right, or recounting or something like that, right? And the problem therein is a decentralized nature. The problem is that states and counties get to decide their own rules, and that this could largely, or at least on a federal level, be done away with. And if we look at voting legislation in the past, the acquisition of technologies used by the federal government or structures used by the federal government down to the state and local level seems to be a trend that we follow, right? And that one of the advantages of a structure of electronic voting is fundamentally, in point addressing this the claim about cost, the scalability of such a structure, right? That it could be simply cross-implemented on all kinds of levels once developed for a federal level, right? And that the universalization of those rules can prevent issues of different states, different locales buying different voting machines, having different rules, setting forth, restrictions due to funding or whatever for, I don't know, drop-off points for non-physical ballots, right? For early voting ballots or absentee ballots. Things that all of these things can be addressed by a centralized structure, right? That is fundamentally one of the good things about it. The problem of public trust, which is something that J-Balls lays out, is an issue. I mean, but it's not necessarily an issue that's universalizable just to e-voting. I mean, if we're going to make the claim that there exists, let's say, a broad level of public trust in the federal institution of voting or state institutions of voting, I would have to make the claim that you're really not paying attention to federal law, right? Whether that's something that's fundamentally addressed by a structure of e-voting that is decentralized, right? In a crypto scenario, sorry, crypto bros, that's a possibility, right? It's a possibility that open source would make some people acquiesce to claims about public trust. But even in the structure that we have now, if we agree that it is largely reliable, which I think on the whole it is, as a kind of non-political question, it seems like the votes get tabulated. It seems like they get counted at least, right? That public trust is eroded largely because of the existence of political institutions as they are, right? Or political movements and narratives as they exist. It's not necessarily structural, right? It's not necessarily structural to the act of the physical ballot going in the box, right? And in that case, I don't know that it's a point particular that e-voting can or can't address. And I would argue that for the crypto bros who care, there might be the positive that it does increase public trust. And so now let's get on to the question of auditing, right? Because this is something
Can I
that
please
I
just
think,
interject?
yeah,
Because,
please.
dude, holy
Absolutely,
shit.
J-Ball.
Okay, so first of
Oh,
all,
I'm
the
sorry,
biggest
go
problem
ahead.
with
Yeah.
electronic voting is it's very difficult to audit these things.
Yep.
Electronic votes can't be audited properly.
In theory.
So no, it's not in theory. I'm talking about what's going on right now. If you are registering your vote with a digital interface, your complete level of trust goes into that machine. That's it. Right? There's no so let me explain to you first of all how a majority of America votes. We use optical scan voting. What that is it's a paper ballot. Take the ballot, and when you hand it in, it goes into an optical scanner which counts it. That ballot falls into a secure box which is sealed, and all out of 52 states, there are 13 that don't require those votes to be audited. The rest of the country takes those votes, they audit those votes, and they take the optical scan results and they send those off right away. Optical scanners are not perfect. And what you'll find as a trend is that all methodologies of voting have downsides. But the system you describe would literally make us the greatest target in the history of cyber attacks. And I know, I'm not going to make this super complicated, but you're basically painting a target on our back with no true way for us to audit these votes. There's no methodology with digital inputting of votes that allows you to audit them with confidence. You talk about court systems and challenges. I think these are good things. I think it's good that we count our votes, even after we have optical scan results, because lo and behold, optical scanners are wrong sometimes. And I think we should have a finalized count at the end of the day, even if the results overall are the same. This is something electronic voting doesn't offer us in any measure. You pretty much have to have blind faith that this system that you're utilizing, which is not being monitored by professionals, which is kept in public places outside of voting hours, and which has a shady custody of ownership at best. It's not something that I think the results speak for themselves. There are surveys that show like around 8% of people actually fully trust electronic voting. What you're describing is something that I think is fantasy. It's science fiction, and that's fine. And we can dream, and dreaming is great. I like to think about the realities. Hey, you want to make this better, dude? Let's restore the Voting Rights Act. That would be great. Because
that's a little bit outside of this discussion, no?
No, it's not, because you're the one that's talking about an over-encompassing federal body that's going to mandate our elections, right?
Yes.
Let's start with the first step.
What do you think the Voting Rights Act is? Christ.
Yeah, do you know what's happened to it? Do you know why it's illegal to hand water bottles to people waiting in line in Georgia?
Yeah, these are political questions, of course. Yeah, this would be very much so a political project akin to the landing on the moon. This is a monumental task. I'm not undercutting this. This is not a snap-your-finger solution. This is a rethinking of what democracy fundamentally is. And by the way, the idea that it is impossible to have a structure by which votes can be audited, I find very, very questionable, right?
Okay, so computer scientists from pretty much like every major university, including multi-million-dollar, probably billion-dollar corporations, have been trying to find a way to make it happen, dude. There are resources going into this because you know what? People love selling electronic voting machines. They can make people money. People like to build these things and make money off of them. Every single methodology of verification is shit.
Well, electronic voting machines are a reality, though. They already exist now, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's not an open. It's not. I don't want to diminuate this conversation by saying it's an open and shut case because electronic voting machines exist. I mean, is it? Am I to understand that that you're of the opinion that we should do a full rollback on all electronic voting machines and we should simply have what non-electronic analog optical vote counting machines?
So first of all, optical scan is electronic. However, your
So
vote
it is
input
electronic.
method, your vote input method is paper. So
Okay.
that's significantly different. I'm talking about direct digital inputs of your votes. When you tap on a screen, this is the candidate I want, this is the vote I'm submitting. That's it.
Mhm.
You have to literally have blind trust in that system to not be fraudulent. So let's talk about fraud for a second. So what is the fear of fraud, right? Let's talk about paper voting fraud. Does it occur? Sure. The issue with paper voting fraud is that it does not scale. But guess what was literally built to fucking scale? Computing.
Sure.
So fraud in computing, and especially in elections where a handful of votes here and there within a district can determine the outcome, is an incredibly dangerous thing to allow to be so easily manipulated.
You keep saying easily manipulated.
I'm talking about, okay, if you want to manipulate paper ballots, that involves submitting false ballots, right? What about compromising a voting machine? How many votes per day?
Or double counting, or selectively losing votes, or having, for instance, the Supreme Court throw out entire counties worth of votes.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah, there's a multitude of ways to commit fraud. Some of it is institutional, and I won't argue with that. But one voting machine that is compromised has access to God, how many votes on a day of an election day, right?
Mhm.
What about like multiple, even two voting machines compromised in one district? That's the election. How do you verify that it's safe? Even the institutions, there's institutions that exist now, and they take random sampling of voting machines and they examine them. What are you going to do this in the middle of an election day? You're going to yoink an electronic voting machine out of a room, have a bunch of cyber security experts examine this thing in the middle of, I don't know, some small town in Illinois? Like, dude, come on. Like,
presumably this would be an overarching structure by which votes are sent into a centralized database that is mirrored
and
by
your
multiple
election
agencies
day
or
is going to
third parties,
require
right?
your election day is going to require skilled labor of professionals that currently probably don't exist in volume
Oh shoot,
enough to make it happen.
that is a real problem for the federal government of the United States.
Yeah.
I wonder where we're going to
definitely
find
mandate
professionals.
people to become cybersecurity professionals. That's great. That's not going to cause any problems. What you're proposing is unrealistic.
It was
right?
It was unrealistic in 1961 to land on the moon. Stop it. This is like the idea that this is entirely out of reach because some TEDx professor in 2014 gave a talk about like how peer-to-peer, you can have a man-in-the-middle attack on a peer-to-peer service. This is laughable, right? This is structurally a thing that can be addressed. One of the fundamental issues of all of the things that I looked at when looking into the subject, and by the way, is universal among the sources that you cited to me, is the refrain constantly from the same people who say that this is a bad idea, that the fundamental problem with this is that the structures are limited, right, in the case of Estonia that implements e-voting, and that the funding is limited, right, that there's just not enough money at a foundational governmental level to make this happen, right? It's never that the structures are fundamentally unsound, that this is unthinkable and couldn't be done ever in a million years. It's that there exist security vulnerabilities. Sure, there do. There exist security vulnerabilities in all manner of electronic technology and communication, right? You're not going to tell me that a bank can't be hacked. And Christ's sake, I mean, the money that you have in the bank is far more important to you as an individual than who gets elected fucking as president, right? Half the people in this country don't even fucking vote. I guarantee you, much more of them have bank accounts.
You know why your money in your bank account is so secure, in a sense, even if the bank does get hacked?
Because it's federally insured. I mean,
because there are records.
At a functional level.
Hold on, because there are records that identify you as the owner of X amount of money. There are records within the bank, outside of digital databases that confirm that. Guess what becomes a problem when you enter into the field of voting? You can't identify people with their votes.
So you can't identify them as a person, meaning that even in a decentralized, let's say a selectively decentralized structure that would be used to tabulate and hold all these votes, right? That a unique or encrypted identifier of your personhood, right, should not be readily available. It shouldn't just say Stanley voted for, Joe Rogan for president, right? This is true, right?
Yeah, I like
So,
writing sci-fi too. Please.
well, let's talk
continue.
about anonymity, right? You can. It's not impossible for like RSA.
You know what,
peer-to-peer
Stanley,
encryption.
dude? Please propose to me a verification system with electronic voting that is functional.
You get a single-use PIN sent to you that unlocks an encrypted RSA peer-to-peer connection, right? That sends out to multiple like decentralized nodes. One that's federal, one that's state, one that's a fucking newspaper, right? And we open source tabulation of votes, right? You then use that same PIN to verify that all of these sources have correctly ascertained your vote for the correct thing. It shows you a little checkbox, and everybody's happy, right? You're
trying to convince the American people to let like a computer farm in Russia count their votes.
A computer farm in Russia count their votes. Sure. What I'm saying
Do you know what
what I'm
open
saying is
source
that
system
we
that you're
can all
proposing
count the
entails?
votes together. We
You
can all
count the
log
votes,
and
yeah,
count
on
the
an
votes
encrypted
together.
data stream moving through a data center in Russia. Excellent
Mhm.
idea, Stanley. That's great. So first of all, try selling that to voters. Good luck. You can try. But I guess since we're still writing sci-fi for some reason, and we're just going to disregard the
A quarter
reality.
of your voting, a quarter of like the voters in the United States think like half the voting machines in Arizona were made by Venezuela. I mean, I'm sorry, dog. This like
That's
public
literally
trust,
the problem.
Trust is built when institutions make returns, right? You trust your government because milk doesn't go up 200% year over year, right? Because you pay your taxes and you theoretically don't get bombed, right? Trust is a thing built over years of time with success, right? With people, viewing the structures that they trust as providing some kind of relationship to them. Of course, this doesn't happen overnight, right? Of course, there's going to be some break-in period for this, maybe on a local level, maybe on a state level, right? Maybe you start this off with fucking referenda.
Yeah.
But
So within like what, a
possible.
10-year period, we go from storming the Capitol building on the day we ratify an election to Star Trek? Can we please continue like into something
Star Trek?
productive and constructive?
Well, I mean, if you'd like to build a
you're
Starship
proposing
Enterprise,
is
I think that's a
fantasy.
different debate.
You don't want to talk about the logistics of electronic voting machines because you know that they are vulnerable. You know that you can't prove that they could ever be trusted. You know that you can't prove that they could be audited. You know that you can't prove that there is a way to verify voting with people that actually functions and doesn't compromise in their identity, which in turn leads to a number of horrific things, including like selling your votes, intimidating voters,
Selling your votes.
local governments within a bipartisan country targeting districts independently based on voter feedback. Like, come on, dude. Do we want to go into something constructive? You can cut down my sources all you want.
I mean, you keep saying constructive, but all I hear is that these things are impossible.
Yeah, because you're not proposing anything realistic. Do you want to exist? Do you want to exist within the current system, or do you want to fantasize?
As a non-data scientist, I started opening up this conversation by saying I'm not proposing a full-fledged structure by which all this security can be maintained.
You just want to masturbate. That's it.
I mean, I do like masturbation, but I don't feel like
nobody's
I'm doing
going to deny that you like masturbation. But if you want to ideologically masturbate over this friction that you're causing here, that's fine.
There is a lot. There does appear to be quite a bit of friction.
You can come from friction. Nobody's going to deny that. But like, I don't want to run around in circles having this like goofy rhetorical argument. I mean, realistically speaking, it's the data's there. There are studies of people's feedback. They don't trust it. Okay. You want to fix the decentralized system, dude? I want to wave a wand and have 3 cocks. All right. It's not always going to work out that way. You can dream and believe all you want. You can compare elections to moon landings. That's fine.
I mean, again, I just don't think it's deniable.
Here.
I just don't think it's deniable that in the history of the United States, especially, right, things that seem incredibly outlandish, right, that seem unthinkable at the time of inception as a federal project, right, become reality due to the very structure of funding and industrial production that is the United States. The Panama Canal did not seem, it seemed very much like science fiction when the French gave it up, right? The
Yeah, and all those
interstate
things,
highway structure equally so, right?
and all those things provided for us a utility, right?
And so does this. I mean, I'm sorry if you don't think that that voting on your phone would drastically improve democracy in the United States as a concept. If that end goal is not worth striving for, I don't know what we're doing here. I don't know if you've ever
And
voted.
there are things that are exponentially less expensive, less complex, and far more safe to ensure a higher voter turnout. Things that can begin a trend behaviorally that encourage people to vote. Why don't we move the election day off a Tuesday and make it a weekend? Why not make it a federal holiday? Why not allow same-day voter registration?
Because this conversation is about electronic voting.
Yeah, but these are measures that can be implemented far more easier than voting on your cell phone.
Because so the problem with those is that even the federal holiday thing has to be acquiesced to by states.
Wait, you're talking about revitalizing the federal government and forming an agency to monitor. So now it's unrealistic?
Yes.
Well, so
it's unrealistic when
I want to break in here for just a moment. So I think the assertion on the table right now is that e-voting, even if it were perfectly secure, wouldn't provide a benefit over and above these other policies, JBOS, that you're arguing for. So Stanley, do you think that there is some benefit to e-voting, even if we were able to pass all of these other policies, making a federal holiday, moving the day to a different day, same-day registration? Is there a benefit over and above that to e-voting?
So we're saying outside of the individual problems with physical voting at various locales, and outside of the arguments about universalization, is that what you're asking me? Because universalization is a huge part of that, right? Which is addressing the decentralized nature of rules.
It's the same shit.
Well, if those policies had passed, would you still want to have an e-voting system, or would you consider the matter settled and there's no need to pursue an e-voting?
If we had a universalized structure of voting, and we had addressed all of the problematic aspects of, well, so first off, it removes, right, e-voting as a structure in this hypothetical science fiction world, right, as JBOS says, does remove the possibility for a regression of those things as we see them regressing now, right? Because it's no longer in the hands of those entities, right? It's no longer up to rules of
no longer in the
states
hands
in terms
of the
of funding
Supreme
and
Court. The Supreme Court are the people who gutted the Voting Rights Act. It's the highest court in the country.
Mm-hmm.
The federal government is the body that puts out guidelines.
Well, again,
they can pass legislation tomorrow to enforce them federally as a mandated program.
Well,
what are you talking about?
Again, that's a political discussion for
it's not
why
political
the
discussion. It's a logistical
why the
one.
Democrats don't pack the fucking court.
The highest
what I'm
court in our
hearing
country
what
has
I'm
had
hearing
influence in our elections, and you're telling me now that the federal government is toothless?
The problem that I keep hearing is, I want to talk about electronic voting. JBOS wants to talk about the Supreme Court, right?
Well, I don't want to talk about the Supreme Court. I'm just countering your dumb fucking points. That's it.
Let's talk about political issues that could theoretically maybe address these structural things that I bring up, as e-voting could be a solution to, right?
Dude, allowing early voting, expanding absentee voting, same-day voter registration would add millions of voters on election day.
I agree. So we can now talk about some things that e-voting does probably on its own.
Okay,
right?
So what's the advantage of voting on your cell phone at home to doing a mail-in ballot?
So like I said, that is tertiary. I'm really glad that we got to this, because I thought we'd get stuck on security forever. So that's what I call like potential for democratization, right? We are finally literally at the point where there's a theoretical technology that could bring us back to like Athens level democratic engagement, right? Where personal engagement from individual citizens when it comes to referenda all the way to legislation is possible from the thing that you keep in your pocket that you use to order pizza, right? And therein, those are like limitless possibilities. That is a theory of democracy on a different schema even than just like a representative parliamentary or congressional system, right? It's a little bit big for this conversation, but I don't get me wrong. I think electronic voting as a structure where you don't have to physically you don't have to physically bring about all of the infrastructure on a day-to-day basis to do things like asking the voting public what they think about, an overarching agenda, right, of a president, or do they favor or disfavor, let's say, a legal precedent, right, in the justice. I mean, the possibilities could be endless, and this would be the inception. This would be the starting point of that, perhaps.
Or
right?
we can just do absentee ballots, like we've been doing for decades, which had bipartisan support,
Absentee
unanimous
ballots for
bipartisan
referendums
support.
that you have to set up physically. I mean, this is literally a paradigm shift, right? A paradigm shift. Yes.
What are we talking about? Are we talking about like voting on if they're going to build a new garden down the street? I mean, your
Yes,
engagement
instance,
problem
yes.
doesn't have to do with your fucking cell phone at that point.
Or
dude.
even on a local level. No, it's you're right. It's in fact a little bit more structural than that. Which e-voting or e-democracy in general, right, is a potential solution to, right? The reason that most people don't even engage in like local politics is because they got fucking work during the day, and all this shit happens when they have work. Their ability to like call in to a city council meeting is a question of their physical availability for doing that, right? And voting
they
on
should move the day to
prescriptive
like
even
Saturday or something.
they could move the
crazy.
day to like a Saturday, or you could simply remove the physicality from the equation. I think that is incredibly promising. I think the idea that that's throw the baby out with the bathwater because something it's impossible, right, is not to me a particularly persuasive argument. Right? Implementation can look a million different ways. What I'm arguing for is this should be a priority, right? This should be a priority as a polity, as a national project, because of the potential inherent like paradigm shifting advantages of this in terms of democratization of government.
All of which is purely speculative.
That is it is speculative, and I think I make a fair argument for it, right? Of course it's speculative. Like I say, I mean,
you still haven't really offered up
our discussions
an
about
advantage
our
to
discussions
paper
about
ballots. What's the difference between voting on your cell phone and dropping something in your mailbox?
Because if I want to be a crypto bro, I can theoretically look it up in the decentralized database of votes.
You should.
And once I put it in the box, I have no fucking idea where it goes. I mean, that's one advantage. There's no structure.
So wait, you know exactly where it goes on a decentralized blockchain, bro?
If it's assigned to me with a fucking encrypted pin, yes.
Do you know how many fucking nodes you're hitting just Googling, like, I don't know, Carmen Electra? Like, I don't know, dude, some pot girl. I don't. Who cares?
I mean, so tap into the federal thing and put your RSA encrypted pin in there and check what your fucking vote was. You know how many voting structures?
Dude. Yo, explain that to grandma, dude.
You know how many voting structures? This could be explained with a TikTok if the UI is simple enough. Stop this.
What's
like,
a TikTok?
Do you know how many democratic structures of voting right now offer you individual auditability right now? Fucking zero. Your vote goes in the box, and you trust that it didn't get thrown out with the box, that it wasn't double counted, that it wasn't counted at all, that you didn't fucking that the machine didn't fucking eat it, that the representatives for either party aren't paid off or whatever, right? Like all of those structures that are a fundamental critiques of e-voting as a structure, right, are present not only in physical voting, but they also have the problem of never being able to do individual auditing. You never know if your shit's counted, right?
Yeah. Any form of verification compromises anonymity, even though you are saying all these nice, fun words that really don't mean jack shit.
So perhaps I'm proposing a trade-off,
right?
I mean,
let me finish. You're proposing this like nice little idea of I don't know why the fuck we're talking about blockchain voting, dude. I'm gonna throw up. This is exhausting. I don't know why we're talking about this right now. This is so
I'm
fucking
sorry I
dumb.
made you sick.
No, it's fine, dude. It's the stupidity that makes me sick. Listen, dude. You can't demonstrate like anything outside of just whatever you Googled this morning about it, right? You keep saying PIN numbers, cell phones. Dude, verifying sucks. Listen, this shit sucks. There's a lot of problems. We're compounding those issues with digitizing it, with turning it into electronic voting. And even though you glaze over the idea of, these things are insecure and there are problems with them, and it's some 2014 TEDx guy, you're sitting over here like basically reading me a short spurt and trying to get me to buy some altcoin that you're gonna rug pull under me in like a week.
I'm not a Bitcoin fan, dog. This is literally, by the way, one of the only things that crypto could possibly be useful for, like blockchain technology.
Not.
This is like literally the single use case where the concept of decentralization could be used for some kind of fundamentally useful implementation, right? But to address your point directly, J-Boss, right? I understand concerns about anonymity. I do. I have to say, in a world where people slap bumper stickers and are constantly having public feuds with their names assigned to them on Facebook about like who they voted for, I have to admit that I don't know that anonymity is as big of a problem as it was in like the post-feudal days of early democracies. I have to admit that for the vast majority of the American voting populace, anonymity and their the particularities of their vote do not seem to be a real personal impediment to their ability to speak on them, right?
How much would your vote cost, Stanley? I'm just curious.
I
would
mean,
probably sell mine for like $1,000.
theoretically, because I think it's literally a federal crime to talk about that, but I don't know, $50.
No, it's
I don't
not.
fucking know.
The fuck they gonna do, dude?
I don't.
They can't even cover their own elections, bro.
Look, I don't want to get clipped and shipped. All right.
You're not gonna get clipped.
How much would my vote
Do you know
cost?
what you get to do when you can now verify your vote and anonymity is gone? I can sell my fucking vote on eBay, bro. I can sell my shit on the fucking dark
Motherfucker, you can do that now.
How are you gonna verify it? How are you gonna prove to them that you
How do
actually
they verify
voted
it now?
for who you
I mean,
say you're from?
again.
No,
right?
hold on. Let's not run away. I'm asking you a clear question. What's your price?
One of the two political parties.
I'm around 500 or a hand job. Those are what I would do for my vote. All right. What about you?
I appreciate that your civic duty is of very low value to you. Like, look, Doc, like,
what if I promise that you'll come?
One of the problems is
one of
the fundamental narratives of one of the parties of the United States is that inherently by the policies that the Democrats promote.
Listen, Stanley, I'm not trying to break your spot here, but if you're looking for like a guy, we can make it happen, dude. I have a firm grip.
I think we're memeing at this point. I think I've made my case quite known.
I don't think you've made shit, bro. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, dude.
I would like to make this point because it's very, very important and dear to my heart, right? Like, on the case of bribery, one of the American political parties basically states that the policies of the other political party are in essence bribery, right? They are fundamentally, all social programs are a direct form of bribery. And this concept that like, oh no, we're going to have people selling votes on eBay. I mean, I'm sorry, dude. It's against the law.
You're going to tell me we should put Hitler in a labor camp,
you have an investigate. No, I'm not
go.
going to argue that. You have an investigative unit that fucking seeks out these crimes. You make it illegal. I mean, what do you do with things that are illegal? You try people. You try to investigate. I'm sorry. Like, it is possible to buy votes now. Yes, it is.
Dude, they made buying weed illegal. It was pretty easy to do that.
I mean, by the way, how do you verify a bought vote now? Post a fucking picture of an absentee ballot. I'm sorry, these are non-universalized concepts. Are they far more scalable? Yes, but auditing could be far more scalable. Availability and
what do you mean? You can just take any ballot. They're not all of the security data on an absentee ballot is like relatively like
fucking mail an absentee ballot.
Bullshit. It doesn't matter, right?
I mean, it's
you can literally just print out a PDF of a ballot and then just sell. No, when you can actually prove with a verifiable system that you voted for this person, congratulations, you can now sell votes. Your government can now target you if you vote for who they don't like. Your state can target you.
Oh my god! I mean, I'm sorry. If we're at the point where we're suggesting that there's going to be like state-sponsored death squads for the Joe Biden's voters, I think we are not talking about a structure where e-voting or any structure of voting is going to save you, right? If it's like, well,
Yeah, I know, you just
by the way,
destroyed voter
we're
anonymity to make it happen,
we're
dude.
decrypting all of these. Oh yeah, and right around the corner from that are the Joe Biden death squads. Like, I don't know. I feel like
I
we've
would much prefer a Nancy Pelosi death squad.
really. I
Yeah.
find her quite repugnant.
Oh,
Wait, are we
That's
are we on the side of Nancy Pelosi, or are we the death squad for Nancy Pelosi?
I don't know.
We're nearing the end of time. With the small amount we have left before we kind of get into closing statements, I would like to hear from J-Boz about Stanley earlier had brought up physical barriers to voting. Do you think that do you J-Boz think that those are largely resolved by things like federal holiday, moving the voting day to a correct place? What
Yeah, so
do you think is a good solution for those?
there's actually a lot of methods. There's early voting programs where you can vote early at locations that are convenient to you. There's absentee voting, which up until 2020 had huge bipartisan support and absolutely like microscopic levels of fraud. Moving the voting or making it a federal holiday is great. Same day voter registration. What you don't want to do is if somebody decides to show up, turn them away, right? If you want to engage people in participation in elections, there are far more reasonable and far more easier to implement things than letting them vote on their cell phone. Like
Okay.
that's my
Okay. Stanley, do you think, having heard what J-Boz just said, are there any other like physical barriers to voting that you think that those specific policies would fail to cover and that e-voting would be able to solve?
I mean, databasing is one. So this is kind of folded into a broader discussion about federal ID legislation that we don't have to get into.
definitely
But I'm sorry.
nothing. Go on.
But federalized and a federally adjudicated voter rolls being rolled into an electronic voting system, right? The very fact of its nature as being electronic. For instance, Louisiana, I think, was the first state. My dumb home state was the first one to roll out electronic IDs, which we now have, which are, believe it or not, a big stepping stone to potential larger enfranchisement, right, because of the non-physical nature of them. Past voter rolls, I mean, that's kind of a separate discussion that we never really got to. I don't necessarily disagree with J-Boz that all of those things are good things, right? But I do fundamentally think that we can like walk and chew bubblegum at the same time, right? That it's not that regardless of whether or not you solve all those problems, that e-voting does provide real tangible benefits, and even, as I said, kind of paradigm shifting, interesting conceptualizations of how government would be organized. But go ahead, J-Boz. I'm sorry.
Benefits that you have failed to prove.
Okay, all right.
It's all right. Don't worry
So
about it.
if we're gonna,
we all have to take an L.
Ollie, do you have anything else, or should we do closing statements?
We've got a little bit of extra time, so if there were any other points that you or J-Boz wanted to cover that haven't been hit adequately, now would be the time. Otherwise, let's get into closing statements and reverse what we did with the opening. So J-Boz go first, and then Stanley can have the last word.
I'll just do a closing statement. Pretty straightforward. Electronic voting doesn't necessarily offer us any advantages. There are certain levels of convenience it does offer. Paper voting is not perfect. However, it is pretty good at deflecting the scalability of fraud at the levels that electronic voting would enable, to almost a staggering margin, right? Right now, I think what our main challenges has to do far more with things like I said, the Voting Rights Act, the accessibility of voting, which, as it stands, due to the construction of our system, which I would contend could use revitalizing. I don't know if centralizing it in the federal government is a great idea, especially given the two-party system. However, there's there's far more productive things that we could do. The fantasies proposed today either don't make a lot of technical sense, and I don't really think have any substantial value to really argue for electronic voting. I mean, across the board. There's multiple examples of electronic voting issues. It was weaponized in 2020 in Arizona to force recounts that cost the taxpayers of Arizona millions of dollars for no other reason than to just throw bullshit into the ring, to just start trouble, to try and dismantle the election. I mean, we had people storming the Capitol of the United States of America on the day we were supposed to ratify votes, certify the election, and it was rhetorically influenced. And you don't have the backup of something that can be audited. We've entered an era that I think a lot of people are disgusted by, an era in which the Supreme Court decides elections, in which the Supreme Court erodes the rights that have been introduced to the people of America for their voting. States are enacting laws that reduce the accessibility, specifically target certain demographics. The ideals that my opponent proposed today are terrifying on multiple levels. Removing anonymity is, I mean, my God, if they're already going after people waiting in line and handing them water bottles, imagine what they could do if they knew who was voting for who. I don't know. It sounds like a wacky, goofy, next level Star Trek fantasy. I don't think there's any substance to it. I don't think my opponent has, in any clear way at all, demonstrated that electronic voting can do anything that the current systems do other than make it, I don't know, digital.
All right. Thank you, J-Boz. Stanley, you may proceed.
Okay, so first off, I'd like to, in my closing, I'd like to reiterate kind of what I brought up. That the nature of this discussion, should the U.S. implement electronic voting, was inherently going to be somewhat theoretical by its nature. But given the requisite backgrounds of both of us, not being architects of this system, it's going to be a little bit wishy-washy. It's going to be a little bit dreamy. It's going to be a little bit theoretical. And I think I made a pretty good case about the potential for such structures. I would like to reiterate that I think some of the issues that my opponent brought up are fundamentally political, that are not structural to the actual object of putting a paper vote in a box or not, right? And that when he brings up issues like I'm not sure that centralization is the issue, and then cites a bunch of things where centralization of voting rules are precisely the problem, right? That's not a known goal, right? That by its nature, the centralization of an open source, or whatever we want to call this, centralized but decentralized and mirrored structure that could be created, are not inherently more willing to be audited, more able to be audited rather than less, right? I think issues of security have been kind of largely not addressed by my opponent, other than saying, this is just not a thing that can happen. Although I will admit, in all honesty, I don't know if this is a thing that either of us can address at length or necessarily could be, real authorities on. So I suppose in closing, I mean, it is a vaunted dream. It's a big concept, and it would be a massive project, right? But not only does it address some real existing systemic structures, I think it's a vaunted dream kind of worth looking into, worth really putting some money behind. It's the kind of thing that could be as fundamental as the ballot box in and of itself, right? In terms of adjudication, in terms of government. So yeah, I'd closing statement over. I'd like to thank the judges. I'd like to thank my opponent, J-Boz, who even if you decide against me, I think he's going to do a really good job.
You're the best.
Thanks for Toyola for setting this whole thing up. It was really fun.
No problem. Thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
I stand on a good note there.
Okay.
Me and Stanley are buddies.
Yeah, we are actually pretty friendly. We're not at each other's throats.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm on there. It will change once one of you gets money, the other one doesn't. Right? Shut someone out. I don't know. Right? When we got the fat stacks in your hands, tends to change people's minds.
J-Boz will be using the money to buy my e-vote.
Okay.
You're a lot cheaper than $1,200.
Oh, wow.
Damn, dude. Brutal.
All right.
Dinner and a handshake.
Oh, no, something. The hand is going somewhere else. We've already established that. All right. So, yeah, the judges were only slightly split. Slightly split. Look. So, 1 vote for Stanley, 4 votes for J-Boss. J-Boss wins. J-Boss.
Stanley, for coming.
Let's go, dude. Congrats, bro. I don't have to do another one of these. What a blessing, dude. I love you.
So wholesome.
Thank you, Stanley, dude. I appreciate it, buddy.
Absolutely.
This
I hope you get fucking annihilated by Killdozer. Actually, I hope Doobie wins the fucking argue against Doobie, dude. Goddamn.
Okay.
Absolute cancer.
Thank you guys so much. This was cool. This is funny. You guys have great Bali. Thank you for stepping up at the last minute, dude.
Yeah, we
really appreciate you being here, dude. We both really appreciate it. Everyone in this tournament does.
So we have we do have another
you guys have
one after this, but before then, guys, I want to give you a moment to tell people where they can find you. So shout out your social media or someone else's if you prefer. Well, let's go to Stanley first.
You can find me nowhere since my Twitter is banned. I guess you can find me on DGG.
True DGG.
You can find me on DGG getting drunk and yelling in my yard and chain smoking. So you can find me there. Otherwise, yeah, fuck you. I'm not making a YouTube.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Let's go to J-Balls. Our winner, you get to also tell us how you feel about winning. Right, we'll give you a sash and a crown. How are you feeling, buddy?
The people find you in the quarterfinals.
It feels really good. I mean, ever since I immigrated to this country 6 months ago, I have dreamed of the opportunity to yell about this country's elections on the internet with a bunch of strangers, and then talk about hand jobs. No, I don't really have a social presence, but it was great fun. Yeah, you got fucking slapped, Stanley. Dab. You're gonna endure,
fuck up, dude.
You're gonna endure like 6 months of shit from me at a minimum.
Oh, who gives a fuck? Goddamn, like
tonight.
I think one of the fundamental issues with this shit is like all of the there's so many fucking TED Talks where like this is a bad idea, but we need more funding, and it's like motherfuckers always say that they need more funding. Like it is fundamentally true, but
you actually watched the TED Talk in my sources?
I did, dude. I looked at all your fucking sources, dog.
Dude,
did you just troll me with the sources? You're like, these are garbage, dude. I won't waste this fucking time.
There were like 4 or 5 really good ones in there, but most of the ones which you grabbed probably quick, like the TEDx talk, were just bullshit.
Oh, you motherfucker! What a smokescreen asshole, dude. The Estonia one.
I took a few things. I did take a few things. There was a point from that TEDx where the guy talks about, well, whoever designs the software decides the election. That was one thing. I didn't really get into like the specifics of security, because we just started like slapping.
It's crazy fucking boring too.
Yeah, it's fucking boring. Nobody wants to listen to that shit.
Well, even the Estonia one, they had.
All right, you want us going?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
All right, we're going.
In here.
Okay.
Good night, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
See you later.
All right, we're setting up for the next round. We're just waiting on the
headline of the night. We're waiting on Doobie if he's not too afraid to show.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's been showing some cold feet, and I just want to let him know it's okay to be intimidated. This is a big show. It's a lot, big prize money. But if you cower now, Doobie, just won't be able to respect you the same way.
All right. So, guys and gals, if you are enjoying the content, hit that follow button. Hit that follow button while we're waiting to get started here. We're going to be doing this for a few weeks, right? We're doing this weekly. So come back. We will crown a winner, and they will get that prize. That monetary cash prize, 1.2K. So stick around for the excitement. I thought it was actually a really good debate before. Hit up our social media. Keep track of what's going on, right, for the channel, our Twitter, our YouTube, and our Discord. YouTube's where you find the bots. If you miss anything, hit like, comment, and subscribe so that you don't miss anything in the future. Okay, thanks so much. All right, I think they are ready. All right, I'm pulling them in. Wow, that was loud.
We're brought in. Look at that.
Hey. Thanks for being here. Okay. Much appreciated having you both around. Do we got cameras? Doobie?
I'm not really stressed right now. Give me a second.
And this Killdozer?
I'll match Doobie's energy for the debate.
Okay, I'm getting on cam. If you're not on cam, you forfeit. Fuck you.
Okay. Oh, wow. Handsome, beautiful people. Okay, that's great.
Oh, that's cheap. That's cheap.
Handsome, yeah. Handsome, beautiful people.
Handsome, beautiful people. All right. Okay. So, Toyola, if you could introduce this one.
Yeah, so Doobie is very discriminatory. He wants to discriminate against everybody for anything that he doesn't like. He wants to be able to discriminate against people for the color of their skin, the religion that they follow, creed, color, everything. He hates being told that he can't. And Killdozer came over here from my server to step up to the plate for the rights of people everywhere. And he's going to be telling Doobie, stop that. Hey, it's not nice.
Okay. Well, thank you, Killdozer, for being so kind. And taking the humane aspect. And Doobie, he wants to remind you, and he will remind you during this debate. He's a very nice guy. So let's our friend Boyle, Boley, that guy, the moderator. He'll take it up from here. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you. So Doobie, since you were taking the sort of less popular, more controversial position, why don't we hear an opening statement from you first? Then we'll go to Killdozer, and then we will get into a sort of back and forth about the points you each raised. So Doobie, please take it away.
Sure. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how I wanted to argue this, because there are lots of ways to argue that. And I think I settled on the rational way, unfortunately. So modern anti-discrimination laws are fundamentally flawed, and I think that rot starts at the core. Right? The core is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's Title VII, which prohibits discrimination on the grounds of race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. And now, when it was passed, supporters claimed that the act would be a victory for meritocracy and against prejudice. They claimed that it wouldn't lead to quotas or quote-unquote positive discrimination against majority groups. And of course, as we see now, they were absolutely, completely, utterly wrong. Now today, what is it, like 50 years later, 6 years later? I don't do math. We live in a country with state-mandated hiring quotas where you or I could lose a job opportunity because we have the wrong skin color or the wrong set of genitals. Here in California, my beautiful state, we now list race, color, religion, sex, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, marital status, medical condition, military or veteran status, national origin, including language use, ancestry, disability, genetic information, old age, and a laundry list of other shit, right, as protected classes. My amazing state now recently has started requiring that all publicly traded corporations have at least one director from a quote-unquote underrepresented community on their board. And if they don't, right, and if they don't have someone who isn't white and heterosexual on their board, they can get hit with fines ranging from $100,000 to $300,000. And interestingly enough, though they include protections for trans people in that bill, they have no protections for women. I think it's very interesting. Title VII doesn't just cover hiring, right? And these anti-discrimination laws that have kind of waddled out of the states, inspired by Title VII, they don't just cover hiring. They create an entirely new set of laws regulating important decisions that were previously left to the business owner. Things like promotions, wages, and even job assignments. So this bureaucracy, birthed by Title VII, a fucking monster obsessed with your skin color, the god you worship, and the amount of holes between your legs, isn't actually fighting racism, sexism, or any of the other things that it was created to confront. What it's actually doing is regulating the motivations expressed by employers, making it riskier to hire minorities, and wasting the resources of job seekers. Sure, you're not going to see a sign that says Blacks, Irish, Christians, or Jews need not apply. But you won't see that. Instead, you'll waste your time walking into a business owned by a bigot who will be forced to sit through an interview process long enough to tell you that you're not a good fit for some other reason, if you get a fucking reason at all. But how do you know that you didn't get a job because you have a dick and not because you lack merit? If no sane employer is saying this openly, well, what they do is that they start looking for other things that they can stamp with the label of discrimination. So, not enough women at this company? Well, they must be sexist. Not enough evangelical rednecks? Well, they must hate Christians and white people. Is this trans person not being paid enough or promoted quickly enough? They must want all trans people to starve to death. Right? This kind of shit empowers shady lawyers and busybodies in the government to target and bankrupt businesses who weren't in line with whatever arbitrary number they've decided is enough minorities at a business, or even in specific positions within the business. So how do employers protect themselves from this bullshit? Ironically, they hire on the basis of race, sex, religion, etc. Right? To avoid being destroyed by anti-discrimination laws, they discriminate in everything from who they employ to the hiring tests they get. Right? These days, if a court decides that a hiring test uses criteria that is not essential to the job, quote unquote, as if they know what the fuck is essential at a certain business, and it impacts minorities disproportionately, quote unquote, that hiring test is now illegal, even if it were given to all new hires, regardless of their immutable characteristics. Right? We've seen this play out on the national stage in the Supreme Court case with the New Haven Fire Department, where they had 15 openings for promotion. They administered written oral exams to every firefighter interested in the job, Black, brown, Hispanic, and they tested them for things that like firefighters should know. The gear they should put on, what order they should put that gear on, etc. When no Black firefighters met the standard for promotion, they tossed the exams out entirely. An action that discriminated against white firefighters, the Hispanic firefighters, and caused a massive legal battle that took years of work and millions of dollars to sort out. So yes, one clear result of the Civil Rights Act is, I think, a set of state-enforced privileges granted to minorities for nothing but the luck of being born non-white. But with those privileges come a massive increase in the risks and costs associated with hiring minorities. So employers take the best of the minority labor force, rewarding well-educated, wealthy, high-skilled brown people at the expense of poorly educated, low-skilled people in the same minority group. Why hire more brown people if you run the risk of one of them deciding to call you a racist and bankrupt your business if you're not promoting them quickly enough? Now, I think we need to be like adults, right? We need to deal with the fact that people's preferences will tend to sort them into groups defined by common characteristics. For example, a sushi restaurant attempting to provide an authentic aesthetic will not do well if it were staffed by white and Black people. A barbershop in a Black community will not do well if it hires a bunch of Anglos who only have secondhand experience living with kinky hair. On the other hand, I think there are 1,000 little details, from the kind of music played in the office, to the kind of food ordered for lunch, to the kind of decorations that go up around the holidays, that make culturally homogenous workplaces more efficient than workplaces struggling to cater to every fucking protected minority in the country. Now, that isn't to say that there aren't some benefits that come with having a diverse workplace. Of course there are, right? All I'm saying is that the current set of anti-discrimination laws in this country is not working. It's actually counterproductive. And if we wanted to be adults about this shit, we should allow people to go their own way. If they want to have a workplace staffed by Black people, let them have a workplace staffed by Black people. If they want a workplace staffed by white people, let them have a workplace staffed by white people. I think attempting to enforce this like moral fucking this like moral position onto the populace without any consideration for what actually makes them happy is fucking ridiculous, and I think it's immoral. So yeah, they're bad at the end.
All right, thank you, Doobie. Killdozer, sorry I muted you. There's a little bit of hiss, I think, coming from your end.
Yeah, it's probably my my cooling pad or whatever.
Okay. So no worries going forward, but just during that initial opening statement.
Word.
Give Doobie the floor.
Mute me at any time. No need. No worries. So I guess we'll just start with blatant, just like racism is bad. Just like start there. I think that a lot of these anti-discriminatory laws are a product of the expressed values that we have and what we are trying to achieve as a society in the direction that we're trying to work towards, and the types of things that we're trying to say are bad, right? Like we're trying to make a value judgment that racism is bad. It's probably not useful for our society. We should move forward. There's also the effect that, like, yes, all these personal choices add up, right? Like you make personal choices all day, but that's what makes an aggregate when we look at it. And that's what causes societal trends. That's what keeps the systemic oppression in line. Furthermore, I would say that a lot of like the problems that I've seen pointed out with this typically refer to like crime stats or something. I think most of the issues that we have, you mentioned like poor, uneducated, like the poverty issues, these are only exacerbated by like banning people from being hired, right? So you have poverty, which leads to like crime and high stats and high drug use and whatever other negative thing you want to point to, and then this leads to them having like a negative outlook in life, you know, because we can probably recognize that like most marginalized or minority communities end up being pushed towards poverty lines. So that means these communities are negatively affected by the outlook on those things. So then if you don't hire them based on that negative outlook, they never actually have an avenue to escape the cycle of poverty that they're in. And I also think that like our anti-discrimination laws, I'm not, just frame it properly, I'm not arguing for affirmative action. I'm arguing for like for anti-discriminatory hiring laws. That's my main just of the argument. I'm not going to get too much into the affirmative action side of things. Yeah, mine's a little bit more brief here because I don't think it has to be fully explained just yet. We can get into it in a moment.
All right, thank you. Doobie, do you have, maybe we'll start with objections that you have to Killdozer's remarks.
Sure. So racism is bad. Yes, racism is bad. I agree. I don't think people should be racist. I think if business is racist and it discriminates against Asians or whatever, people shouldn't go to that business. They should go to another business. I don't support racism. So sure, right? But what I'm telling you is that these anti-discrimination laws actually encourage racism.
Just pause for a second. Hey, buddy, could you just Killdozer? Could you just mute yourself? Just thank you.
I'll handle that. Yeah, thank you.
I don't think you can because you're not a mod here.
You can just use push to talk, mister.
Yeah.
Wrong server, Bolly.
Yeah.
I muted him.
You're not.
It's on my end.
Okay. Oh, yeah, on your end. Okay. All right. Keep going.
They're not sending their best. Okay. So yeah, racism is bad. Sure, I'm not saying that people should be racist. What I'm telling you is that the current set of laws, that these anti-discrimination laws actually encourage more racism, because like I explained in that example in the opening, you have businesses now imposing race quotas. The state imposing race quotas on businesses, right? Which is fucking ridiculous. Now, unless you're going to sit here and argue that race quotas aren't like a form of racism, I guess we can get into that, or like racial discrimination. I guess we can do that. But it's pretty clear to me that racial discrimination, mandated by the state itself, is pretty fucked. So yeah, now personal choices can add up and cause systemic oppression. Sure, I agree. But what can also happen, and I think what we've seen happen in a lot of Black and brown communities, especially in the United States, is a wealth that would stay in these communities because they were hiring primarily, their own people, right? Now going to outside companies that are building, fucking franchises in these neighborhoods, hiring a bunch of white people who live down the road somewhere, or Asians who live, 2 cities away, and then sucking the wealth out of that community, so the wealth doesn't circulate within the community. So yeah. There you have your systemic oppression, this gentrification happening, whites and Asians coming into Black and brown neighborhoods, sucking out all the wealth and sending it somewhere else. It absolutely is a problem, and I think that could be solved if these people weren't forced to hire based. If these people weren't forced to like not consider race in their hiring practices. Now I can give you other examples. I think that. And this is like especially a problem, maybe because I'm in California, I'm like especially prickly about this. But here in California, like I said, we have gender identity being added to the list of protected classes, like characteristics. Gender identity could mean fucking deer people and turtle people and demon people, right? People who want to be like fairies and faking or whatever the fuck, right? And if I am an employer. If I were to be presented with somebody who's calling themselves deerkin and wants me to call them it's in the workplace, I'm going to take that as an indication of some kind of mental health problem, and I'm not going to want to hire this person. But if I were to tell this person this, right, or to see it's on the resume and just turn them away for that, I could be fucking sued. So instead, what I need to do is waste their time, waste my time, go through the fucking interview process, right, when I know that I'm not going to hire them because I think they're fucking crazy, right? But instead of saying, hey, I just don't want to hire deer people, I got to say, oh, well, sorry, we had other applicants that were more qualified. Right? And then I run the risk, if they were qualified for the job in every other way, I run the risk of them somehow finding out that actually they were qualified and I hired a less qualified person because I didn't want to hire a fucking deer, right? And now my business is fucked and everybody's livelihoods is in the gutter, right? All because I can't just say I don't want to hire deer people. Now I don't agree, right? And I think I agree that these laws were like maybe necessary when they were put into place. Right, some form of anti-discrimination laws were necessary because back then the United States was way more fucking racist, way more discriminatory. But in the modern day, I think we can start pulling back. I think we can stop adding to the list of protected groups. I.e., if I don't want to hire a 70-year-old with cancer, I shouldn't need to hire a fucking 70-year-old with cancer because they're qualified. That's fucking crazy. But here in California, if I turn someone away from their, if I turn somebody away for their age and because they have cancer, I could get sued.
It's like Killdozer did in here.
Gotcha, because I feel like we're moving pretty far. I'm not arguing to like expand the list of protected classes. I'm not in like favor of like xeno pronouns or anything. I'm not against them either. I just have no stance at the moment. Pretty ambiguous on it. My main thrust here is like the racial and like let's focus on the big two, right? Like sex and gender. Not sex and gender. Gender and race. Those are like the big two that we're gonna have to focus on. These are what the main amount of our legislation is based around.
Not
right?
true.
So, like, it's the majority of our legislation right now, if you want to look at like the Civil Rights Act, is like that's the two big social stratifiers we're probably going to have to focus on. Those are the ones that hit
No,
the
not
most
true.
people.
In the modern day, the
most
big push
poor.
is gender identity. That's absolutely like you see these trans people being added and
So
gender
let it be.
identification
So we
being
should
added
also
to protected
include it-
classes
yeah.
all over the country. Right. So right now the current push is gender identity, and that could mean a lot of shit. That could mean, you know, trans people, which I agree people can be trans, and I'm totally in favor of trans people. But if it's a fucking deer person or someone with like neopronouns, and they expect me, and also these laws also cover gender expression. So if an expression of their gender is that they wear little horns on their head, right, because of their demon kin, I can't say, hey, you can't wear fucking horns on your head at the workplace, even if it's your gender expression, because I could get fucking sued. Right? That is fucking ridiculous. Now, do you agree that that is
And you
something
think
that is like beyond the pale that we shouldn't be allowing?
So, like, yeah, I think there is a line to be drawn somewhere, right? Like, it's not just like open to you get to call anything that you do in your actions your gender expression that we have to respect that. I think there's a ridiculous line. I don't think anybody's arguing for that.
So you'd be in favor of discriminating against those people?
I don't think that that's necessarily something that like we're going to consider a protected class. So I don't think it's even like I think that's not in the same line of discrimination. Like
gender identity and gender
expression
expression is absolutely considered protected, like a protected
yeah,
characteristic.
but there's so even then I would draw the line that like a big difference between the like mostly socially accepted and mostly socially recognized like categories of trans woman, trans man, and non-binary versus like the fraction of a fraction corner case that you're bringing up with the xeno pronouns and a deer.
These corner cases matter. This is where the fucking lawsuits happen. Right? They
These
happen when
corner-
one of these corner cases
So I'm
gets a
glad you
lawyer
bring up
and
the
says,
lawsuit.
hey, these people aren't allowing me to wear my deer antlers at fucking work, you know, because they're discriminating against my gender identity, so I'm going to sue them. Right? So this is where these edge cases we're talking about,
isn't that
they
the
matter
entire point
and
of
they're
our
real.
court system? Isn't that the entire point of our court system? Is that like we have somebody who
Yes.
can go through and judge as well, this is a case of discrimination against a protected class. We're like, oh no, this is just a weird case where like somebody wanted to wear deer antlers and they toss the case out.
Wait, hold on. So you're actually in favor of discriminating against people who identify as deers or deer kin or whatever and want to wear antlers. You're okay with them being discriminated against?
I think that that's like yes, because that's just like
Okay.
performativity thing at that point. That's like an optional
Well,
choice.
now you're invalidating their pronouns, which is also discriminatory. You're invalidating their gender identity. So in this thing where you're supposed to be arguing with me that discrimination is shouldn't be allowed, you're currently telling me that you're okay with discriminating against like a gender identity. Like I don't like did we switch
You're
places
kind
here?
of on the like forefront of queer politics. It's not generally even accepted as a thing. And again, this is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of your population, and no one's designed. Like, can you point to me actual
So are trans
legislation?
people.
Can you
Trans
point to me
people are like
actual
what, 1% of
legislation
the
that includes,
population?
like,
Do they
xeno
not matter?
pronouns? Can you point to me like any actual legislation that includes xeno pronouns or like a discussion of
It
anything? that
says
you're talking about?
gender identity. If we can agree that there are people in the United States, people in the world, who would say that wearing
Okay.
antlers or horns is part of their gender identity,
Right
and I can point to some of them on Twitch on the platform that we're on, who would say that wearing these things is part of their gender identity, part of their gender expression. Then
That's
they
great for
exist in
them.
the world, and if they exist in the world, we need to apply these hiring practices and these hiring regulations to them because they're also protected by them.
Yes,
If
we
you're
can apply
saying
them.
that
They can take it to court
if
and they
you're
can be tossed out
invalidating their
because
gender
it's ridiculous.
identity, which would also get you sued, by the way, if you're an employer. If you said, "Hey, yeah, you're telling your deer, I'm not going to use your pronouns. Your pronouns aren't real. You're not actually a deer, so you're just not real. Fuck you." You'd also get sued for that because that's discrimination based on their gender identity. Right? So, like, you're actually telling me that you're in favor of discrimination.
again, the things you're describing as gender expression, we can go through like a list. Of course, everything at some point can be considered. Like you can again make anything a form of gender expression, right? But I don't think that that opens the line to like you're allowed to do anything. And I think that we also have like pretty established social understandings of like, hey, you know, you shouldn't just be wearing like deer antlers or this or whatever. It doesn't. These don't seem to be the things that actually matter here.
Okay, maybe I don't know what your background is. I don't know if you're an employer, but as an employer in California, where we have these crazy ass laws, where if a 6-year-old comes to me and wants a job, I can't turn him away because he's 6 years old. I need to pretend it's because he lacks merit or he's not qualified, right? In this crazy fucking environment that I'm existing as an employer, this absolutely matters. It's absolutely important, and this is why I'm saying that this, in addition to all the other shit I laid out, which you haven't confronted at all, is why
So
I'm saying
don't we
we
accept
should
in,
get
like,
rid
the
of these
6-year-old
anti-discrimination
example
laws
that would
and just
like
let people
negatively
sort
impact?
themselves into the whatever preferences they have in their
So
hiring.
don't you accept in like the 6-year-old, like the 6-year-old isn't able to actually do the job, right? Like, isn't there some kind of like qualification thing that we're looking at here when we're judging based off age?
If the job is sitting at a
Would it be there?
desk, right? And when you're hiring somebody, it's not just that they can do the job currently, right? So the job is like desk work. Yeah, a 6-year-old can probably do desk work, right, on a computer. But if you're hiring somebody long term, you don't want to hire somebody who's going to be retiring in 5 years, right? You don't want to, or 3 years or sooner, or somebody with cancer, because in California, if you have a medical
Wait,
condition,
but those are, there
I
you
can
go.
say,
You're not
hey,
discriminating based on race. You're not discriminating based on gender. You're not
wait, but I
discriminating based
am.
on
It's
identity.
literally their
You're
age.
discriminating against somebody who like, oh, you're retiring in 5 years. We're looking for a
You're doing
long-term
the
candidate.
thing.
That's entirely different. How is this
You're
the same?
doing
You have
you're
to
doing
make these the same.
you've stumbled upon exactly what employers are currently doing to get around these discrimination laws. Right? So instead of saying, "Hey, I'm not going to hire you because you're 6 years old," they'll pretend it's for some other reason, like you just did, like you just encouraged me to do.
Okay, there you go. You are forcing them to find another, and this is why we have a court
It's
system to go through and
fucking
find out if
ridiculous.
this reason is
Why not
justifiable.
just let people be honest, and why waste the time of the old people?
What do you mean
This
be
old person who
honest?
probably doesn't want to work at 6 years old, right, is looking for a job and is now wasting their time talking to me when I'm not going to hire them because they're fucking 6 years old. I should be able to
Okay,
set an age
so, like,
requirement
so
on
take the
my
example.
business and say, I'm not going to hire you if you're over 30
You're
years
just
old.
rambling at this point. You're just
I'm
rambling.
not just rambling.
Like,
I'm explaining to you why what you
take the
just said is
example of,
fucking
like,
ridiculous.
if you just have somebody that you're like not hiring based on racial things, this is just a basic category that like does
So
not mean
focused on
anything
race
about
is
if they're
pretty
able to
solid.
do the job, right? This is not another thing that they can point to. But the reason why we have these is that yes, you force the employer to come up with a reason. You have to have another reason other than these immutable,
Right,
non-necessary,
you force them to
non-impactful
lie and
categories.
waste everybody's time. Basically, is what you're saying.
How is that wasting everybody's time? If you can't
Because
come up
if
with a good
I'm
reason, you
because
deserve
if
to be
it,
sued because then you're
that's
being
well,
discriminatory.
hold on. Wait, but being 6 years old and having cancer is a good enough reason, right? So in
Yeah, the
California,
having cancer
if
part of
somebody has cancer, I can say, hey, I'm not.
because you could say it could negatively impact their
You're
ability to do the job.
You're qualified, but I'm not going to hire you because you have cancer, and I'm worried about your longevity. Right? You can say that. You didn't set out to say, oh, actually, another person came along for the job. Sorry,
You can
they were
absolutely
more qualified.
discriminate when it would negatively impact their ability to do the
No,
job.
you cannot. In fact, there are laws. Actually, recently, Walmart was sued for like $100 million by somebody with Down syndrome because Walmart didn't accommodate their disability. This would absolutely apply to people with cancer, to old people, to dear people, right? These people, if they find that they've been discriminated against for whatever protected class that they're in, they could take it to court and fucking destroy your business. Now, luckily, Walmart is large enough to absorb a hit like that, I'm sure. But if this were to happen to me as a small business owner, I would be fucking destroyed. And so, as a result, I waste people's time when I bring them in to interview them. If they're like old, or I'm looking for a white person because of the area that I'm in, or I'm looking for a Hispanic person because I need somebody that can connect with the Hispanic community in another area that I'm targeting, I waste the time of everybody else that comes in and waiting for a Hispanic person to come by, right, so that I can hire them. So why not just let me be honest and say, hey, I'm looking for a Hispanic person that speaks Spanish because I'm targeting this area. Why not just let me do that? Why force me to lie to everybody and waste everybody's time?
Wait, but you can the Civil Rights Act that you pointed to, and a lot of the legislature allows you to do this on the application. Like if you run a strip club, it's obvious you're going to hire women at your strip club. This isn't like a discrimination thing. This is part of your tactic. This is an aesthetic performance or an art piece. Same thing with your like, oh, like what about the sushi restaurant, right? I think that they should have to hire everybody. But if you're doing a mainly performative thing or an art piece, I think that would be separate from like the vast majority of what we're talking about. And also
okay. So first off, saying that saying that strippers are just like doing performative work and it's not like real work is really offensive. Sex work is
Sex
real
work
work,
is work,
and,
but it's a
and you
performance.
should be
Right? Like
you should be
acting is
ashamed
work,
for
but it's a
implying that it's not.
performative act, right?
But
I don't
hold
think
on.
that's
So
that
because
crazy
they're
to say.
performing, like what the?
So we would
Are you
just have
saying?
different
Are you
standards
saying?
for
Okay,
art,
hold on.
because art has
Oh wait, hold
nebulous
on.
definitions.
They're not. What you're speaking?
That's a
as if they're-
completely
you're
like different
speaking
field
as
of
if they're
argument to what
clowns
you're
or
originally
something.
supposed to
These
be here
women
for.
get on these poles and they have fucking amazing leg strength to spin around this shit and do amazing acrobatics that I couldn't
Yes,
fucking do.
sex work is work.
And
Yes.
you're diminishing them by saying, "Oh well, hey, they're just performing." So
I don't
yeah,
think it's
it's work.
diminishing at all to say
Absolutely
that this is
diminishing.
a performance
Let's try to
piece. I don't think it's
do one at
diminishing
a
to
time.
say that acting is a performance piece. Sorry, what was that, Bobby?
Let's try to
I'm
go
sorry,
one at a time. We can move on from
I'm sorry.
the
That was off topic.
mean
I was just
comments about
that wasn't a
performative
meme
work not
comment.
being work.
Yes,
So,
sex work
and
is
I
work.
know that was off topic, but I was just really offended by the sexism that I witnessed here. Okay. So and what you're saying is actually not true though. So if I were to have a sushi restaurant or a black barber shop, if I had more than 15 employees, I would be subject to these laws, right? So that means if a bunch of black and white people came in to apply for a job at my sushi restaurant, and I didn't want to hire them because I was looking for Asians because I wanted like an authentic aesthetic, I couldn't say, hey, no, I can't hire you because you're black or white or
That's good.
brown. I would need to
That's
waste.
good.
I would need to waste their time. These people who are looking for jobs, so probably don't have a lot of disposable income. I'd need to waste their time, waste my time, waste everybody's resources to play along with your shitty moral grandstanding, right? Where I could solve this problem very easily by just saying, hey, I'm looking for Asian workers to work at my fucking sushi restaurant. Why aren't you letting me do that?
Again, this is just good. Like I think that you should get
Why
hit
is
for
that
that.
good?
And I think I shouldn't. I don't think it's a waste of your time because if you can't come up with a good reason, that is exactly why I have these laws so that I can bring you to court.
The
You
race
should
is
not
literally
hire
the good reason.
the no,
fact that they're
race is
part
a
of the racial
non-reason.
group,
That's outlawed.
the
So
fact that they're part of the
that's
racial
why
group
it's a waste
does
of time,
not.
right?
Well,
Wait, hold up, Doobie.
hold on. Let's Killdozer. Why is race not a good reason?
So race isn't a good reason because it has no bearing on anything, right? Like your ability to do something is like not impacted by your race.
That was
It
head
just
assery
isn't.
of the highest level. So again, if I want an authentic aesthetic for my sushi restaurant, the race of the people staffing that restaurant absolutely matters, right? Preferably I'd want a bunch of Japanese people. If I can't get that, I'd want a bunch of Asians, because most people can't tell the difference if we're honest, right? So like, no,
I'm cool with
Asians,
throwing out your aesthetics for the sake of like bettering like humanity.
why do you think this betters humanity? Why do you think forcing people to waste time and money, forcing
Because I
job
think increasing
seekers
it,
and
like-
employers, how does it
Because
make
one,
society better to force people to
you're
waste
not allowed
time and
to be
money
racist,
to
and I
go
think
for a
that
job
racism-
interview that they're not going to get and everybody knows they're not going to fucking get?
Again, this will put employers out of business who are racist. This puts bigots out of business who are
ridiculous.
racist. People who should have an onus on them to not be acting this way. One, as a human on the planet, you shouldn't be acting that way. And then two, as an employer, it's even doubly bad, right? Because now you're in an economic position of power against these people.
Are
It
you
just
just
doesn't
like-
seem. I would want
Are you
these
just
people.
like opposed to authentic sushi restaurants and black barbershops?
Again, can a white person not make you authentic sushi?
No, I don't think so. I
No,
think-
white people
yeah,
can't
no,
make
I think-
sushi.
I think if you want the authentic aesthetic, you want the guy wearing like a kimono or whatever the fuck, working in the back with his samurai sword to make you sushi. If you want like the authentic experience, right? If you had like a white dude named Steve and he's right there behind the
so
counter,
your aesthetic is
right?
right.
It's not. Yes. What
So
the
like
fuck are you
then
talking
they
about?
were just essentializing race.
Do you think
like,
Taco
this
Bell is
insane.
authentic Mexican food?
No,
what are
no, I
you
don't
saying?
think Taco Bell is authentic Mexican food.
Okay.
That's for a host of reasons.
So
other than the
if
fact that the
I
guy
wanted to
behind the
start,
fryer is Mexican,
if I wanted to start
and
a
if the guy
restaurant,
behind the fryer was Mexican, that
God.
doesn't magically make it authentic, like Mexican food.
Hold on. If I wanted to start an authentic aesthetic with like a Mexican restaurant, do you think it'd be unreasonable for me to want to hire a bunch of Hispanics that fit the look of the food that I'm serving?
Yeah, I think that like just hiring
why?
a bunch of Hispanics is like because you could find
they're
anybody else
qualified
of any race.
otherwise.
Doobie,
The
you
real
gotta let
question
Killdozer talk.
The real
God
question
damn
is your food good, right? Like that's the thing you should be worried about as an employer. Is your food good? I don't think the aesthetic of like your employees should be the crux of your thing going, right? Like that shouldn't no, that's not a reason why you should be able to discriminate.
I feel like again, what we're witnessing here, somebody willing to sacrifice the resources of job seekers who are already struggling, of employers, willing to basically force society into a situation where we're encouraging people to lie to each other, right? Totally undermining the credibility of employers and job seekers. you're in favor of that system, which I've described, and I've already described countless ways this system is totally counterproductive, because it makes you feel nice to see, you know, that people aren't being turned away specifically because they're white on the job application. That is just, I don't understand why you think you should be able to sacrifice the efficiency of a business, the goodwill of the people of the business, the credibility of employers for your quest to feel good about yourself when you go to sleep, because you know no whites aren't appearing on the job application out in the world.
Again, this is just rambling. What do you?
It isn't rambling.
The goodwill of the business. Like what are you referring to with any of this?
So again, I've explained to you why I'm currently required to lie to people, right? So if someone comes to me for a job, I'm gonna say this out again, and I'm looking for a specific racial group, a specific demographic, because I mean, my business, one of my offices is pretty close to Glendale. Right? Lots of Armenians, and I've had this experience before where I'm looking specifically for an Armenian person because I'm targeting that area specifically. And Glendale has the second biggest population of Armenians on the planet, right? So I'm looking for an Armenian that can connect with that community, speak the language, all that kind of shit, right? So when I put out the job application, I try to target that area, right? But inevitably, I'm going to get Black people, white people, Asians, yada yada, Hispanics showing up, looking for this job opportunity, wanting to interview, right? And they're qualified, and instead of just like, hey, actually, sorry.
So that means
wait, hold on.
Ukrainian,
just
or Armenian rather.
They're qualified. They're qualified in every other way, right? So instead of me just telling them, hey, I'm sorry, I'm looking for an Armenian, I need to okay their request to come in for an interview, right? And then sit through the fucking interview process for like at least an hour, waste their time, waste their gas money, waste my time, right? When I know that I'm going to turn them away because I'm actually looking for a qualified candidate who also is Armenian.
Right? According to the laws, you could just put must speak Armenian on the fucking job application and turn people away based on the fact that you advertised, hey, I need you to speak Armenian for this job. That's the qualification.
Okay. So
not the fact that they are Armenian, it's that they need to speak Armenian. That's the point.
No, it's not just the language. Culture.
So you're down for like people to be racist and be like, I only connect with people.
It's not racist. It is
that's
not
the
racist.
Racism from like the Armenians that they only want to talk to other Armenians.
Oh my god. Maybe it's because you're a white person, right? You don't understand like a racial preference in a group, right? So Prime might feel more comfortable talking to Black people. I might feel more comfortable speaking to Americans than I would Canadians, right? As an American. Being a white person, where the vast majority of people
Doobie's a fucking Mexican. I'm putting it out there.
I'm a brown American. Okay, fuck it.
Go ahead.
The vast majority of people you've interacted with in your life are probably white. So maybe you don't understand the kind of connection, the kind of like a little boost of camaraderie you can get by seeing somebody out in the wild who looks like you, right? This is why we're always talking about representation in movies and Hollywood and all this kind of shit, because people like to see people who look like them in positions of like in movies and media and all this kind of shit. But also when they're going to a business and they see someone who looks like them and speaks like them and is grown up in the same culture as them, they're going to feel a much greater connection to that person. And given that I'm in the business of sales, right, I'm looking for that connection. Right, so absolutely, being Armenian, having that culture would be part of the requirements of the qualifications for the job.
So the Black dude showed up and spoke Armenian and had a degree in like Armenian studies and fully understood the culture and was able to do the thing you're asking him. I think you have no reason to say you can't hire him just because he's not the right like nationality to connect with these people. He can connect with them on all of the cultural lines, which he fully is capable of understanding.
If that unicorn walked into my office, right, and he had all these shitty, useless degrees, in addition to being good at sales, which is what I'm looking for, then yeah, I would consider hiring him. But given that there aren't many of these unicorns out there, I think it saves everybody a lot of time.
Wait, so you just said you would hire him. You just said you would hire him. So that's quite simple.
I said I'd consider hiring him.
You just said it.
So, but
you would hire him.
No, listen. Because I'm not a racist, right? What I'm looking for is certain characteristics that are more likely to get people to connect with my customer base.
Calm down.
Right. So given if that unicorn existed, I might consider hiring him, right? But given that these unicorns aren't out there that I'm aware of, that I've ever met, right? I think I'll save everybody a lot of time.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
I'm looking specifically for an Armenian. I'm looking for specifically an Armenian, right? So like again, you haven't given me like other than like, racism is bad, which is like silly.
You just told me that you would hire this person, right?
Yeah, I said I'd consider it.
Okay, so like. clearly then the thing about being Armenian isn't that important, right? Like as long as the person understood the culture and was able to carry out their job, that like this didn't negatively impact them in any way. And mind you, you can discriminate against the people who don't understand the Armenian culture. You can discriminate against your non-unicorns by simply
I
putting
literally
on.
can't.
You need to understand Ukrainian. You must have a background in Ukrainian. I keep saying Ukrainian because this is what we talk about. Must have a
Actually, no.
background in Armenian cultural studies, and you must speak Armenian,
Cultural
right?
studies? Wait,
Well,
hold on.
yeah, you could just
I'm
say
not,
that.
I'm
But
not
like,
really looking for shit you
obviously,
can
if
learn
an
in the
Armenian person
textbook.
shows up and has lived in Armenia, you can be like, oh, they have lived experience. That checks off that qualification. Anybody who doesn't have that lived experience, you need to have some kind of education.
But
or
I
living
literally
experience.
can't do that.
It does
I laid this out to you in California, right? How it's not only race, color, religion, all this kind of shit, but it includes ancestry, right? It includes nationality.
Yeah,
national
can you point to me
origin.
the thing that says as long as you don't advertise, it's not okay?
What? No, it isn't okay. Even if you don't advertise it, right? It's still not okay.
So
Right,
you're going to need to actually point to the legislation because most of the legislation allows for it as long as it's announced, right? So you can put out looking for must be this age, like this is how modeling agencies work. You must be this age, this color, like they'll discriminate against on weight and all the other things, but it's announced in the job application, and that's where it's required.
No, I think you're, again, maybe this is because you're not an employer, but you're misunderstanding how that works, right? Because modeling agencies tend to hire contractors, right? So if they're looking for specific characteristics in a model, right, for a certain contract, right, they can be very specific about what they're looking for because these people are not like W-2 employees, right? But if the modeling agency had 15 or more W-2 employees, right, like actual employees of the business, they couldn't say, hey, we're looking to hire a W-2 employee for our business that is specifically black because we're advertising in the black area. They couldn't say that.
You seem to be like hung up on this affirmative action thing again, and it just seems weird. Like the affirmative action and like
I didn't mention affirmative action at all.
I just keep thinking about it because we're glazing
You're
over
hung
the
up on it,
like,
okay.
that's what you're stuck on, right? Like that's where this is hitting from, is like the negative impacts of these racial laws outside of just saying you can't hire people based on this, correct?
Can you repeat that again? I was flabbergasted by the dumb shit you said earlier. Can you say that again?
All right. What's your main problem with these laws? Because to my understanding right now, it's like some of the weird stuff that California is doing. It's some of the affirmative action and like the quotas, right? Like none of that is part of like the actual racial discriminatory stuff. Which is like I just want to make sure we're arguing on the same points here and like on the same page.
I think you're hyper focused on race. I am talking about the laws that actually exist, right? So my issue is everything. I think the expansion of these laws. I think that the original law, like I said, might have been necessary at the time because America was way more racist back then. But today, given that America is not as racist as it used to be, right,
can you prove that? Can you prove that like if we got rid of these laws,
you want me to
we
prove
wouldn't immediately have a spike in all of these problems and they wouldn't come flooding
Hold
right
on.
back? And that these
You
laws,
want me-
so like
you
you
want me to
admit that they
prove-
do something
Oh, God.
important, that they did something important when they were put in place. How can you say that they're not continuing to do something important right now?
Are
This just doesn't make sense.
are you seriously asking me to prove that the United States today and that the average person today is not as racist as they were in 1960?
It's not, are they less racist? It's, are they so like less racist that it's no longer a factor anymore and we can remove the laws that are protections? I don't think we're there yet. And I think that's why those laws are there. That's the whole point.
I think, again, I think you're, first off, you're over focused on the race thing, by the way. But there's an expansion.
For anything, for gender, same thing applies.
There's an expansion.
Why we have those laws. I don't think our patriarchal society is at the point yet where if you removed all of these things, like it wouldn't come flooding back. These things would come flood. Like we have these safeguards in place to keep our society safe.
What do you mean
Why would we
flooding
get rid of
back? What do you mean
So you're
flooding
saying,
back?
okay. So when you say
so-
these things, when you say that these things were necessary at the time that they were put in, because they stopped a bad thing, right? And you're saying like now that the bad thing's gone, we no longer need them. And I'm saying the bad thing's not gone. I'm saying that what we've done so far has worked. Why would we stop doing it? If you like everything you're pointing to, like we've gotten less racist. I wonder why that is. Maybe it's all our anti-discriminatory, anti-racist legislation. It's like why we've gotten less like patriarchal. Why we've gotten less misogynistic. It's probably because of the legislation and the trends in society that we've pushed. This was done by the federal government.
Again,
this is like how you get away from these things.
Maybe you like didn't hear like half what I said in the intro at all, right? So, this isn't just race. This isn't just sex, right? They're expanding this to age. They're expanding this to medical conditions. So if you have cancer or AIDS and you go for a job, the person can't turn you away because they have cancer or AIDS, right? And beyond that, employers are currently discriminating in the other direction, right? So they're hiring on less qualified people because they happen to have a certain skin color or a certain set of genitals, right? Or because they're of a certain underrepresented minority, right? And not only is this happening at the federal level, this is happening at the state level, where the state is mandating discrimination in the business hiring practices, in their promotion practices, right? So, like I laid out earlier, here in California, businesses are publicly traded corporations are now required to have a member of an underrepresented minority on their board, right?
Okay, that's not what I'm arguing for. That's not. I'm not
Wait,
California.
hold on. But wait, hold on. So you'd be in favor of getting rid of that, and so if there was discrimination there,
I'm ambiguous
you'd
on
be-
it. I don't have enough information about
ambiguous
the
on it,
exact
okay.
details of the legislation.
Okay. So, and beyond that, they've expanded it to like gender identity. So if somebody in California, if a deer person were to show up in my office, I couldn't say, hey, actually, I don't want to hire deer people. Sorry. Right? I would need to come up with some lie and feed them that lie for why I'm not hiring them. And you're telling me that you think that's okay for me to like not be able to just be honest with this person about what and waste their time, waste my time.
Again, I don't think it's a waste of time. I think if
How
you
is it
can't
not a
come up
waste
with
of
a
time?
legit reason and this person can hit you for it, that's legit. And again, like
Why
you keep
is that?
saying, like you keep trying to like bring this to like, oh, we're not talking about race, we're not talking about gender, we're talking about like, yeah, we can have a different conversation about which lines we should draw about who is a protected class and who isn't a protected class. But that's a completely separate conversation than should we protect protected classes. This is two separate things.
Okay, so no, because what I thought we were arguing here, right, is that I'm saying that businesses should be able to discriminate in their hiring practices and their promotion practices, all these sorts of things. And you were saying that they should not be able to discriminate. Instead, what you're arguing is that they should be able to discriminate in some ways, whether it's a gender identity against deer people or against people with cancer or whatever the fuck. You're saying, hey, I might be okay with that discrimination. So I'm not opposed to all discrimination. I just really think we shouldn't be able to say that you're not. I'm not going to hire you because you're restaurant.
This is literally why I said you want to have a debate about what is a protected class. That's a different conversation, right? Because that's where we say, okay, like you can probably discriminate against people like for these things because they're not part of the protected class that we've agreed upon, right? Like that's why, yes, some discrimination is okay, some discrimination is not. We agree upon what's not, and we write it into legislation. We codify it. That's how that works.
So which discrimination specifically would you say is okay?
Discrimination specifically, if someone's
which current protected classes that I can read them out to you again if you'd like. In fact, I'll do it. So race, color, religion, sex, gender identity, gender
so you're doing what
orientation,
hold up.
marital
you're
status,
out the protective
medical
classes
condition,
that we've
medical
already
or veteran status. No, I'm asking you, since you're saying that you disagree with some of these.
You're saying no, I didn't say I disagreed with any of them.
Yes, you did.
You're saying I said that you can discriminate on some things. I'm saying if those are the things that we
I'm asking you what
as
things.
protected classes, we can't
we didn't agree
on
on this. Don't say we. I don't agree with this. Right? In fact, I'm arguing against it. So you're
when I
saying
say
that
me,
it
I
might
mean
be
as a
okay.
society. Like Doobie, if we
I don't think we as a society have agreed that it's not okay to turn away deer people. Okay, this is something that's happened at the state level in California. Here, it's very very lefty, very democratic dominated state.
Can you actually point to this case? Do you have anything to like source back up?
It's not a case. You can look up California protected classes and you'll find a list. Okay, Google it, bitch. Okay, so I'm asking you to tell me specifically, like which classes you're okay with me discriminating against.
Dude, a host. Take your pick.
No, I'm asking you. I'm asking you to name some.
This is I almost have choice paralyzation right now. Give me a second, because like what you could do, like this person every 3 moons turns into a fucking werewolf, and I don't want to hire werewolves. Like that's fine, right? Like I can think of literally anything that isn't the immutable traits of like race, right? Like these things are like non-changing, or even in the changing ones like gender, right? Like we accept that, like that probably is like a non-thing impacting their workflow, so they can do it.
So race
right?
and
That's not something that we're going to discriminate against. You can this is a societally agreed upon thing. I don't know why.
No, it's not. You're speaking as if it's like settled science or something, right? So the things that you're like, the things that you're okay with, that you're not okay with people discriminating about, are like race and sex. It sounds like. So this entire other list that I fucking read to you, you'd be okay with me discriminating against people for all those other things, right? It sounds like. So it seems like you agree with me that current anti-discrimination laws are fucked and we should get rid of them. They're fundamentally flawed.
No. I don't agree with that.
You just told me that you'd be okay with me discriminating against deer people and wolf king. You use the example of wolfkin, right? So if I can discriminate against wolfkin, why not deer people? You just like a anti-dog or something? Like what are you saying?
Again, like yeah, if you could prove that that negatively impacted their ability to work, if you could prove that that like somehow like negatively impacted your business, like the customer and the relationships, you would have to actually prove
It
that like
doesn't
some
matter.
form of harm from this. That's what I think it does.
Literally doesn't matter because
If
they
they're doing
would
something
say,
that doesn't harm anybody, I
they
don't
would
think it should
say
matter.
it does. Okay, if my customer showed up in my office and one of my employees is wearing antlers
Wait,
and asking them to call this employee it's right or fair or whatever the fuck, right? This is going to make my business look pretty fucked in the local community. So I wouldn't want to hire this person, right? So like I can't say, hey, well, sorry, I can't hire you because my customer is going to be weirded out, right? Because this their gender identity and their gender expression is a protected characteristic. So you're telling me that you're okay with me discriminating against people, is what you're saying.
No.
You just said yes. You just said that I could discriminate against wolfkin.
But do you agree that in the case
I don't
of
think I meant Wolfkin. I think I meant somebody who actually turns
So-
into I was meant to be
so
facetious.
Killdozer,
What's up,
so
Larry?
Killdozer, in the case that Doobie just mentioned, where you have a deerkin person or deer gender, do you agree that the impact that could have by alienating your customers, do you agree that that is a reason to not hire, like a legitimate reason to not hire them? Or do you think
No,
it
I
should,
don't think
do you think
in and
that
of
should
itself
run
is-
afoul of like your?
I don't think that in and of itself is sufficient, right? Because if you were living in like a racist society, that's not a reason not to hire a black person, right? Like that's not.
I'm talking about
because
deer
the
people.
society at large would react negatively to this.
We're
It's not a
focused on
reason not to
race, right? Race isn't the only thing covered by these laws. So he asked you specifically about the deerkin, right? And then you went to race for some reason. So specifically with the deerkin, if I
It was
got
an
the idea
analogy,
that
it was
that it was going to creep on my customers if there's somebody requiring that they be called its pronouns and wearing antlers at my fucking professional business, right?
That's your customer's problem.
Could that damage my bit? No, it isn't. What is my
Because
problem?
it's, like, your
Is the
problem.
if it's the customer's problem, it's my problem, right? So you're
I don't
saying
think
that
you should
I
just,
should
like,
have to
be
do
able to discriminate or
damage to
something.
my business and damage to the livelihoods of all my other employees to accommodate your fucked up moral grandstanding.
Again, I don't think I think you're greatly outblowing how damaging it would be. I also think that, again, we're not going to cater to the side of our society that wants to be intolerant, right? Like, I could honestly get, like, they can get fucked. And if your business can't live without, like, catering to the racism, then your business can get fucked. I don't care. These are just,
you're
it's just
for race again for some reason. Like I don't, but you
if
just
you,
told
all
me a
right,
little
if
bit-
you're a
you just
transphobic
told
ass
me a little bit
business
ago-
can't function without catering
you
to, like,
just told
Turks
me
and
a little bit
transphobic, they can get
you-
fucked.
You just told me a little bit ago that you're okay with me discriminating against wolfkin, right? People who like identify as wolves or whatever the fuck.
I didn't say wolfkin. I don't know where you're going with this. I was being
Yes,
hyperbolic.
you said somebody that thinks they turn into a wolf. That is a wolfkin.
No,
Okay.
that they do turn into a wolf is what he said.
They
not
do.
that they think they do.
I'm not here to argue.
We don't
Oh,
need
so
to-
someone who literally
need to
turns
cover
into
that
a
case.
werewolf. Oh, okay.
So hold on.
I guess that'd be a medical condition, so that'd also be covered in that.
I want to ensure we're talking about all discrimination, right? Like that's how this conversation started. And
so the
rather
topic on
than
the thing,
just
let's say racial discrimination. And when we first cleared this out,
No, it was all
specifically said the two ones named. I can look at the message. Said race and sex.
Okay, so are you saying that you're okay then with discrimination in hiring and promotions so long as it's not race or sex?
No, I didn't say that. I just said that was what we originally talked about.
Okay, but
I
earlier
think
you
it's fine.
said
I don't think
you said to take my pick, right? And because you were saying that some of this discrimination might be fine, so you said take your pick, right? And I asked you to name some of them, right? And you went to the wolf person, right? So like, can you name another one for me?
Of what? Like a moment where discrimination would be okay?
Of a currently protected class that you think could be okay for me to discriminate against?
No, because it'd be a currently protected class.
None? Wait,
I don't
so
think
is all you're doing is like appealing to the law? So it's currently illegal, so you can't do it? Is that all your argument is?
The societal agreement that these things are protected classes. Like we've come to a societal agreement that race is a protected class. We've come to a societal agreement that gender identity, that gender are protected
No,
classes.
we haven't.
We haven't come to a societal agreement that wolfkin is a protected class.
Hold on.
We don't
so
recognize
the
wolfkin
moment.
as, like, a
Okay,
legitimate thing that you can like have a protection for.
So all you're currently saying, right, I think, is that because we come to a societal agreement, i.e., there's a law about it somewhere that some bureaucrats came up with, right? That constitutes a societal agreement, so we can't argue against it and we can't change it, right? I'm saying, hey, I know that there's currently a law that says this thing. I want to change the law. right? All you're saying is, hey, well, that law exists, so you can't do it. Like that.
No,
That's really silly.
Again, this is like this is all built on consensus and like the history and the like the marginalization and the problems that go into this. That's why they're protected classes, is because they're persecuted and they're at risk and they're vulnerable, right? These like because you're wolfkin, I don't think that like one, I don't think that negatively impacts your ability to do your job. So discriminating against you for just based on that just seems to be like a personal prejudice thing. But again, that might be a personal prejudice we accept because we haven't as a society been like, yo, man, you got to respect the wolfkin stuff. That's like a legitimate thing.
Wait, but that would be their gender identity, right? If their gender is wolfkin or deerkin, their gender identity and their pronouns would be like it's or furry, whatever the. So given that gender identity is in that list that I laid out for you, that you could Google yourselves, right? It seems like based on your standard, there is a societal agreement about wolfkin and deerkin and all these other weirdos, right? So you're saying that we shouldn't be able to discriminate against them. But now you're saying that, hey, we haven't come to a decision about that. So either there's a societal agreement or there isn't.
Even then, I think it would come to a matter of if their gender expression, as you brought up before, it matters if their gender expression is specifically an act or a thing that is negatively impacting their ability to do their job. So long as it's not, I don't think you should be able to discriminate against them.
It's not just their ability to do their job, right?
That's what matters, right?
No, not really. So that plus their impact on the customers. If I have a business and my customers come in and someone's wearing antlers in my professional office, right? I think a lot of customers are going to be creeped out by that because No, I can't, because this is their gender expression. I can't wipe that away with the dress code.
What do you mean?
We're coming to the end of our time.
Can you not, or like, if I want to wear like jeans,
one moment.
My gender expression is jeans. Can I not go into the office with jeans, or can they require me to wear a suit?
Guys, you're laying out the issue with these laws.
Guys, just a note on time. We've got about 7 minutes left, so I'd like to save at least 5 minutes for your closing statements. So just keep that time in mind.
Yeah. So if you're just invalidating the genders of these people, which I might be okay with, right? Sure, right? But current law, the thing that I'm arguing against, doesn't allow me to do that in hiring. It'll require me to not only accommodate their gender identity, but their gender expression. So their gender expression is wearing a tail at work and wearing antlers to the office and looking and creeping out my customers. I need to be okay with it. I need to accommodate that. And if I don't accommodate that, I could be sued.
Yeah, I'm just gonna bite the bullet and say yes. If it's like yes.
Okay, so I should damage my business for your weird moral grandstanding, and I should just like lie to people, right? Because I'm not going to hire them. Actually, I'm just going to say, hey, actually someone else came along. Sorry, you didn't get the job.
But this negative impact will eventually run out, right? Because eventually, if like this person, your business doesn't hire them and you get sued for not hiring them, then your business shuts down, right? Like great. But if all the businesses that don't hire them get shut down, then maybe the businesses that have to turn will now have to start hiring them. Right, and then customers will be forced to interact with them because businesses have to hire them. So now customers have to get used to that shit. They have to adapt to the growing and changing needs of the society. This is how you get social change. Yes, people are going to get hurt by this policy, but that is the necessary pain to getting change.
Okay, so it seems like you're implying now that like because this is social change and because people are identifying this way, we should just accept them societally. And this is like a totally separate argument, but I don't think you could justify just flat out accepting all gender expressions that people come up with. Right?
Again,
I can point you to a wiki full of star genders and turtle genders, and I doubt you're going to say, hey, that's a totally valid gender expression. And people that are like multi-system, right? Who can have like multiple personalities. Wait, but I would as an employer. Like, I don't understand why you're not getting that.
You could go to the lawsuit, and you could go to the judge, and you could make cases, right? Like this is why we have case law. Like this is why we have.
I could overturn the current law, which is what I've been arguing.
If you walk in and you're like, my gender expression is shooting tap guns at the first person that walks through the door.
We're at 5 minutes. I'd like to go to closing statements here. I think Doobie, if you wouldn't mind giving a concise closing statement, and then Killdozer, you can have the last word.
Yeah, I think interestingly enough, I think that Killdozer in this debate stumbled upon a lot of what I was proposing from the start, which is you should lie to your job seekers. You should come up with other reasons for why you're not hiring them and not tell them that you're not hiring because they're a deer. You should damage your business because Killdozer wants to put forward his social plan for deracializing America or accepting deer people, whatever the fuck. You should hire trans people with no boobs at Hooters because they identify as women, even though, you know, if the customer walks in, they're going to see a trans person with no boobs because they haven't gone through any HRT or any kind of transition, and they're going to be totally flabbergasted by why this person's working at Hooters. You're telling me all these things, which I think it's like your moral grandstanding here is why these I think demonstrates the need for people like me to come out and argue against you, because you're willing to sacrifice the livelihoods of not just the employers but the employees and who would lose their jobs if these businesses were shut down. Right? I think your desire to just be like hyper progressive and hyper ally over every fucking thing because it makes you feel good at night, regardless of the consequences to society, is why I need to come out here and argue with you. So yeah, thanks, Killdozer.
All right. Thank you for that statement, Killdozer. Close us out.
Right on, Doobie. Always lovely to have a chat. I would say that, again, I'm okay with some people getting hurt in the short term if it gets me long term good. I'm a consequentialist. I got some cringe takes about that if you want them. No, I think, again, at the end of the day, like, these things are put in place to protect our most vulnerable and our most at-risk members, right? Like, we do these things because, as we saw before, this is what made them necessary when we didn't have them. The negative, terrible things that happened when they were going on, right? Like, this is why we enact policy to stop this. And I think that removing them or degrading them in any way allows weak points in this system that allows this stuff to all come flooding back. It allows it to just happen, right? So I'm okay with you having to, like, quote unquote waste time, right? I don't see that as a waste of time. I see that as forcing you to justify your decision. And if you can't, then you deserve to get sued. And if your customers can't adapt to the progression that we're making as a society, maybe they don't deserve their goods. And maybe lacking their goods for a little bit will get them to actually accept some of the ideas that we're putting forth. Right? And same thing with your employers. If your employee can't, like, if your business can't form without, like, catering to transphobes or catering to racists, probably don't care about your business. Your business is probably negative for society overall and it can get fucked. You shouldn't be discriminatory. I am okay with sacrificing a great deal, honestly, in exchange for, like, social progression. So yeah, I'm there. It's not moral grandstanding if it actually gets good results and it protects people and it results in a overall betterment of life for our most vulnerable and our most marginalized.
All right. Thank you, Killdozer, and thank you both for participating.
Okay. This has been a fight. I gotta tell you, behind the scenes, because we got a group DM with the judges, and holy crap! Like I said, it was close before, much closer now. Oh boy,
this was very hard.
Yeah, this just like we got like 100 messages going back and forth between you two, so it's a big one. I'm still waiting for all of them to get their votes in. I think we have 4 of the 5. There's 1, there's 2. Oh, maybe there's 2. Guys, like, type in your votes again. Okay, like, or maybe you can count them up for me, Toyola.
Okay, so we got 1, 2. Hang on, we need one more person to vote.
Yeah, we're waiting on one more person to vote.
It's a tiebreaker, I think. Wait, hang on.
I don't think it is.
Yeah, it's not. So it is looking like it is 3 votes in favor of Doobie and 2 votes in favor of Killdozer. That's where we're going to be at. Doobie is moving on to the quarterfinals, and we will be seeing him next week.
Evil wins. Oh, man.
Thank you for having me on.
Oh, thank you. But this has been actually quite close. People have been, like, going back and forth.
Very tight debate, yeah.
Up to your closings, right? So that oftentimes that doesn't happen, but up to your closings, people are going back and forth. So this one was a really tough one. Okay, so let's go to Killdozer. I want you to be able to give your social media, or maybe someone else's social media, whatever you like. This is your time.
I don't really want y'all to follow me on anything. It's a bunch of creeps. You can come argue with me on Discord. That's where you can find me.
Hey, thank you so much. All right. And then, fuck. It's like staring.
It's so uncomfortable.
It's
it was
like
so
giving
hard to debate that and keep a straight face at times. Like
it's like, oh my god, it's like staring at the crotch of the fucking devil. Doobie.
Sometimes he calls me and he says, "Hang on 1 second, I need to get on camera," and that's the only thing he puts on, and then he just sits there.
The worst. Doobie. Give us your victory speech and tell people where they can find you.
Hello. Okay, that's better. I run the politics server on Discord, the best and biggest politics server on the platform, discord.gg/politics. But I think that the fact that this was close at all, and this wasn't like him, it's like a fucking route for him, like abandoning the premise that he was supposed to be arguing, like right up front. I think
We
it's,
never really agreed on
I think demonstrates how cocked our society is right now, and the fact that these people are willing to sacrifice common sense and good argumentation because they want to feel good about themselves and pat themselves on the back because they defeated the evil doobie in his quest for discrimination. Yeah, so suck my dick.
Well, it looks like we'll be seeing your dick back in the next week's episode for fighting, or I guess going up against J-Boz in the quarterfinal round.
Yeah, very, very excited. Very excited. And thank you all for that. To my audience, we are going to wrap things up soon, but I want to let you know that we'll have a lot of content tomorrow. In case you don't know, in case you've been watching this entire time, apparently Will Smith pimp smacked Chris Rock. Yeah, we're going to be talking about that tomorrow. You like look it up. He pimp smacked Chris Rock.
Was that how you found out about that?
Yeah. so
thank you for watching us instead of the Oscars, by the way, everybody. Super big. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I know. Someone DM me. I lost like 5 people DM me about that. But yeah, that's something that happened. We're gonna be talking about that tomorrow. It's gonna be super exciting. We're gonna have a great group of individuals here, so I want you to be a part of that. If you've been liking this content so far, hit that follow button. Hit that follow button. Make sure notifications on. So you know I'm going live. We'll do 7 nights a week. We'll be back here tomorrow, and we'll provide more content for you. Consider supporting this channel by subbing to the channel. Get these subs, guys. That's what allows me to keep this around, right? So we can do all these great things by these interesting people, so you guys can get fucking triggered in chat, like I saw you all just now. So if you appreciate having this this platform, then help out the community. Exclamation point. Social and chat for my social media. I got a Twitter where I tweet things. Check it out to keep track of all of this. Discord, Hunts with this community. Be a part of the Discord. We do everything on Discord. And of course, there's YouTube where you can find the VODs, right? So if you missed anything, check that out. Like, comment, subscribe, consider becoming a YouTube member in that join button, supporting us that way as well. Okay, we have our other 2 people who are here. I want to make sure they get to throw out their social medias. If our kind moderator can shout himself out, please.
Yeah, so my username's Bulyai Lobachevsky. That's a nerdy math reference. You can find me at the House of Toy Discord server, Toyolo's server, where I am currently hanging out and mostly doing coding stuff. I don't have a social media presence because I think social media is the next great genocide. That's an overstatement. I'm just lazy. But yeah, thanks for hosting me. If you have any complaints, you can hate tag me at the House of Toy, and I will try to read your complaints. But thanks to all the contestants today. This was really fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for hosting, Prime.
Absolutely. And then, all right, we'll get to you, Dave, in a second, because Brandon wants to say something. But Toyola.
Yeah, so I'm Toyolo. I'm put together this tournament. If you like it, make sure to keep tuning in on Sundays on PrimeCayes Twitch. Other than that, you can find me at twitter.com/Toyolo_. You can find me at twitch.tv/Toyolo11777. I'm really sorry about that one. Or you can come check out my Discord server. It's the House of Toy. We got a lot of projects like this tournament going on. We have a tournament, I think, every month scheduled for like the next 3 months. If anybody wants to get in on that, we got a lot of projects like we're making some bots. We got some tech stuff. If you want to join our dev team, come work on projects with us. Or if you have like a subject that you really care about and you want to bring your big old brain over and talk to people who care about it as well, just stop on down by the house.
Thank you. All right. I am going to... Oh, DB. Yep.
So yeah, it just like sunk in that you said my next problem is J-Boz, and given by his performance earlier in the DGG server, so I can use the word DGG server, we're arguing about like whether or not the no-knock warrant should be a thing, or whether or not cops should have guns, or whether or not cops should go like chase criminals in car chases. I was not impressed, and he's going to lose, and you should be very afraid. Okay.
The challenge?
Mr. Destiny is not setting his best, like 100%. Like, it's fucking embarrassing.
Destiny may not be setting his best, but I'm bringing mine. So in the quarterfinals next week, we have Live Free versus Abu, Antidepressants versus Uni, Octavian versus Marcia, and J-Boss versus Doobie. And it seems like it's going to be pretty hot.
Think so. All right.